he imagines, casting powerful doubts on many men's claims that they could take someone out in 2 seconds or smash a guy's face in with their fist.
On average, men describing hypothetical fights overestimated their level of combat skill by a factor of 40, with 80% of males incorrectly predicting they could mess a guy up real bad with one solid punch to the jaw. During actual physical altercations, however, these men were statistically more likely to end up hurting themselves, or, most commonly, trying to diffuse the tension by nervously saying, "Hey man, let's all just calm down, okay?" before any fighting even came to pass.
Researchers discovered that men were significantly weaker than they verbally indicated while chatting with friends in bars and locker rooms, and that men who were 90% sure they could tear someone a new asshole tended to succeed in fewer than 1 in 10 fights.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
Turns out he's pretty much hardcore libertarian and he's trying to relocate to the States. I'm like, come to New Hampshire, buddy.
I do have a story about truck drivers being fucked by electric car mandate shit in California.
Yep, this guy's got the solution.
Oh, really? That's funny. Yeah. Well, you'll definitely have stuff to say about that one then. It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control. And 603-283-6160 is the phone number you can call. That's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
Jay.
And Mark.
Okay, good. We're all coming through clearly, I believe. Well, today there looks to be some breaking news about the Jeffrey Epstein case. And for listeners who don't know, Jeffrey Epstein is a man who has been convicted or was waiting for his trial with the feds for a sex trafficking case, and then he allegedly killed himself in jail, but there's a lot of questions about it. Oh, all the cameras turned themselves off at the exact right time, stuff like that. People believe he is a pedophile, sex trafficking ring leader, but this is a call-in talk radio show. You can call in at 603-283-6160, and we have Alu from New Hampshire on the line. Alu, what's on your mind?
Hi, what's on my mind is that I miss Bonnie and Jay and Mark. So, hello, guys.
Oh, hello.
Hey, man.
Hey, hello.
I was just thinking you haven't called in a while.
It's been a while. Yeah, I mean to call every other night to argue with you guys about stuff I heard, but I never got a chance because my amazing son and everything else was keeping me busy. So I had an epiphany that I want feedback from you people on. But before that, just a heads up, it seems like there's a few seconds of a hot mic before you came on the show,
yeah,
on the podcast and on the radio.
Thanks
so
for
just
that.
a heads up, don't say anything too crazy.
I realized it right afterwards. It's because I had the server muted, so I couldn't hear the bumper music, but it is what it is.
Okay, awesome. Yeah,
Thank
call
you.
the wizards at Ian, and Ian will set you straight. So before I even get to my epiphany, about the Epstein thing that you mentioned in the intro, Dan Bongino is doing a decent job reporting of this, and he mentions that the story could be that they probably have a massive, disgusting, disturbing pedophile ring where a lot of the most powerful elites in the world, including like kings and princes and governors, have been. But even more important than that and related is that blackmail is important, because if any kind of nefarious have blackmail on these people saying we'll release the videotape these very young girls on the island, you better do our bidding, that means that a lot of our leaders are compromised. So if Biden and others are compromised, that's a big national security issue, because so that's blackmail. So that's in a sense the biggest part of the story, in addition to how disturbing the actual crimes are.
Yeah, I totally, I guess I wouldn't say believe, but I could totally see that being the case, that they run this specific pedophile ring for the purposes of getting politicians and royalty in England in compromising positions, and then they can tell them, oh, you have to do our bidding. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I think that using the term pedophile kind of draws up the wrong thing here. Not to say that I find this acceptable, but that pedophile generally means a very young person, whereas I think, just as a guess, if Epstein wasn't I tend to think that these very intelligent people at these intelligence agencies don't miss a lot of opportunities. But a great opportunity was missed because I think, this is just me guessing here, that politicians could be relatively easily enticed after 3 or 4 drinks to, I don't know, slip into the back with a gal that is near her 18th birthday, and that would be, would catch a lot of people in a trap. I mean, that's a very believable trap. I could see, were I the sort that would cheat on my, significant other or whatever the situation might be, that, I could be tricked into that situation. I don't drink and I don't do those things, but nonetheless.
Especially nowadays where all those girls that are 17 and a half look 30.
They all, but Bonnie, when you get to be my age, they all look 17.
Oh, okay.
25 to, from 12 to 25, they all look 17.
When you become a father and you have a daughter, they all look 14 and 12.
I guess that makes sense. I don't know what it is. I think it's just because I'm
Mark, I think I agree with what you're saying, and there's that. But then additionally, I do believe that these elites who have gotten used to and no longer find novel pleasure with 18-year-olds or any other kind of novelty, they might be, sick enough to move on to way younger. And there's, all sorts of evidence, including from Bongino's Secret Service sources, that there were way younger people.
Whoa.
And
See,
and kids.
That's the thing about it, Alu. I think that it would just be so silly for this to be such a big deal if it was like 16-year-olds. Oh my gosh. Like, I just think it's so silly. Like, oh, she was coerced because she agreed to be a internationally famous model and have her apartment paid, like luxury apartment paid for by Epstein. Wouldn't most girls who dated a guy who had a good job be like victims of abuse if that were the case? I think that honestly,
there's a huge difference between the two.
Yeah, I think that there's
between
things
an 18-year-old
we don't know.
Or 20-year-old who's like goes back to the island 17 times and 5 years later regrets what she did because she was somewhat coerced because she wanted a good role in Hollywood and she slept with a bunch of producers and 50 years later said maybe that was coercion, and maybe it was, but it's not the same as underage rape.
Right.
If they cheat and she was willing, whereas if these people are abusing 5-year-olds, that's a different universe.
Exactly.
So they shouldn't even be compared in the same universe of like murder compared to like smoking pot. So totally different universes. And again, a lot of things get conflated. So anyway, totally different topic. But my epiphany I just had like 2 minutes ago is the way to abolish qualified immunity. The biggest defense to our bills that failed a few years ago by like 1 or 2 votes in the New Hampshire House to abolish qualified immunity, which is a Supreme Court created doctrine decades ago that makes it essentially impossible to sue government agents, including cops, if you want to sue them for violation of rights under Section 19.
And social workers.
Yep. So it makes it impossible unless you can prove that essentially that courts have ruled that it's a violation of the civil rights or unconstitutional what they did in previous cases in the exact same set of circumstances in the same jurisdiction. Now, when states like try to abolish it, like New Hampshire, what they say is, well, police have to make split-second decisions, and we can't have them thinking about wrecking their brains about every court case ever and the laws and all that stuff, and they have to defend themselves. So what we could do is defeat that by putting in the bill, saying that exempt from this, like they will get qualified immunity, meaning the courthouse doors are closed and you can't even enter to sue them if it's a split-second decision. But even better is this, because qualified immunity, what it does is it's not an affirmative defense, like saying self-defense is an affirmative defense to homicide charges because, you were defending yourself. This is not an affirmative defense. This locks the courthouse doors. If you try to sue before discovery, before anything, the judge kicks you out of the courtroom and says you can't even entertain the idea of a lawsuit because of qualified immunity. So what I think they should do is put into the law saying, instructing the jury or making it an affirmative defense in the actual trial. So you actually have to have a trial saying that, and tell the jury, in jury instructions, tell the judge, if you find that this was a split-second decision, then acquit him, or then rule in favor of the cop. But if it was the kind of thing where he planned to burn down your house for a week, burned down your house, abused you, shot you, and then stole $1 million from you a week later, that's not a split-second decision, is it? And therefore, he should be liable. So if we put that into the law, saying it's an affirmative defense, but you have to actually have a trial instead of closing the courthouse doors with qualified immunity, is that a way to defeat their arguments and pass a good bill?
Oh, that's
I
really
think that
smart. Okay, go ahead,
I
Mark.
think it's better than what we've got, Alu. I still am of the opinion that police are humans, and humans ought to be responsible for their actions. And if they're not responsible for their actions, expect irresponsible behavior, and that's what we're getting from police. I would go also a little further and just go ahead and say that security guards currently are everything that cops are: uniform, gun, taser, the whole thing. And for some reason, they can be responsible for their actions and cops can't. Just
Right.
because the cops work for the government. And I don't really understand that. It sounds like really what the voters are asking for, or the representatives are asking for here, is that people not be able to sue the town or the city for the things that they are responsible for.
Okay, you bring up an excellent point, and here's the other big argument. They say we can't sue officers because they'll be bankrupt. They're worried about being bankrupt if they ever engage with any person. Therefore, they'll stay in their cop car, which I'm fine with, and they'll never want to actually save lives because we'll sue them. Guess what? There have been studies done, tons of studies. Over 99% of police officers in the United States, I believe, are indemnified, meaning their government town pays for all lawsuits. If you sue them, they don't pay a penny. The town government, meaning all the taxpayers, pay for it. So no cop, technically like zero cops have ever been bankrupted or even had to pay lawsuits and stuff. It's extremely rare. There were 2 cops who did something horrific and abused a person, and they were forced to pay, but it was like $2,000. So probably didn't bankrupt them. They probably worked 1 overtime shift and they were good to go. So that's another issue that they say, but again, that's a myth because over 99% of departments totally pick up the bill for police officers. But another big thing is that there's a lot of conflation of qualified immunity that a lot of people, including some lawyers, have. They think it applies to criminal prosecution. Qualified immunity is only like an absolute defense for civil lawsuits when you sue a government agent for violating your civil rights under the law passed 150 years ago for violation of rights. Criminal prosecution, if a cop comes into my house and murders me, the real issue is that they're not prosecuted because prosecutors are literally their coworkers. They work together, and there's no dispute. They work together. And what we need to do is one day in my dreams figure out a way to construct a law that makes some kind of mandatory prosecution that compels the prosecutor to bring charges, because prosecutors have absolute discretion and absolute immunity, which is better than QI. It's absolute.
Wow.
You can't even think of suing a prosecutor ever for anything. But if we could find a way somehow to compel them to bring charges and really try to prosecute them as much as possible, that would be the real fix, to be honest. Like,
there actually is a way.
Prosecuted.
There is a way. Take a mental note of this. It's called private attorney general.
Mm-hmm.
So what the private attorney general process is, well, it actually, I believe it falls under like racketeering and conspiracy. So this was where basically this private attorney general law act, whatever, that's not exactly what it's called, but if you start internet searching private attorney general and racketeering and conspiracy, this was basically passed like in the 70s. So like private citizens could bring charges as a private attorney general against like mafia and organized crime units. And so this is pretty easy to apply directly to like government agents, like in particular with the case that my family has had with New Hampshire DCYF, for example. There is an attorney. His name is Ross McLeod, and he works for New Hampshire DCYF. And one of the things that he does is he is constantly filing and submitting like motions for contempt, for example, for these social workers. So the social workers, Ross McLeod, on like this document, this motion for contempt document that he brought against me and my wife, he submits it as the attorney. And then the social worker, her name's Melissa Coombs, New Hampshire DCYF social worker. She swears under the pains and penalties of perjury that, everything in the aforesaid, document is true and accurate. And so the attorney submits this. Now, this attorney is submitting these contempt orders based on what they call an RTE, which is a right to enter order that family court rubber stamps. And you've got to understand about these family courts, they just rubber stamp everything because they have all these ex parte orders, which means like my wife and I were never invited to these court hearings. We didn't even know about it. They just do it all behind closed doors, ex parte. And the family court judges just pretty much rubber stamp every single thing that the attorneys and the social workers bring forth. Now, when it comes to contempt, you cannot put someone in contempt. This is like a maxim of law. You cannot put someone in contempt unless they've been ordered to do or to not do something. So with the right to or the basically the right to enter or the assessment that DCYF wanted to do in my case, where they're like, hey, we want to interview your 2-year-old daughter alone. We want to inspect your house. We want to come into your house.
It actually ordered Melissa Coombs to go investigate you, not ordered you to allow that, right?
Well, what the order says, a police officer, comma, a social worker, or a child protection parole officer shall enter premises, inspect premises, and interview 2-year-old, blah, blah, blah. And so what they did is they filed a contempt order because I rejected DCYF's offer to contract with us. This is, no, I'm not contracting with you guys. I'm not doing that. No, go away. And I actually filed a multiple-page cease and desist order with them, a fee schedule, a bunch of things to tell them, how serious I was. I did not want to deal with these guys. So anyways, they just automatically do these motion for a contempt order, and they don't even have a contempt order. Nobody's actually in contempt because there wasn't an order from myself or my wife to allow them to enter my house or to provide them, let them interview my daughter alone. And this is just like fear tactics that they generally use against people who are, poor and lack information, ignorant, poor people, because, they have a scheme to harvest children because it's very, very profitable. It's lucrative. Under the Social Security Administration gives tremendous amounts of financial incentives for, DCYF essentially to traffic children. I mean, trafficking is buying, selling, trading, getting paid to do something. So that being said, when it comes to this lawyer's constantly doing this. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to be challenging qualified immunity because I want to bring claims against this Ross McLeod and this Melissa Coombs for violating my rights.
And where does the private attorney general part come in?
Yeah, as far as private prosecution, how do you go about actually mechanically doing that?
I don't. So I studied this 20 years ago, and I haven't looked at it in a while. But what I can do, Alu, is I can actually dig into it a little bit and send you some links on it because I think this would be something that you would be interested in digging into. But if you internet search, the guy's name is actually Paul Mitchell, kind of like the hair, dude.
I was like, that sounds familiar.
But he was Paul Mitchell, private attorney general, and I used to study a lot of his work back in the day. And it was essentially there's a way you can file as a private attorney general to basically investigate racketeering.
You would be considered the private attorney general?
Any private citizen can.
Wow.
And you
the concept of private prosecution, I think, has existed in some other countries in the past, maybe, where the person, and biblically in Torah and Jews, by the way, I think, if someone commits a crime, it's you, or if you were killed, it's your family members prosecuting on behalf of the victim. And it's a whole different kind of ballgame.
Yep, and that sounds sort of familiar as some of the basis for this kind of stuff. And it was originally brought to sort of rein in organized crime because the idea was there was so much organized crime that the Justice Department couldn't even deal with it. And the other problem with the Justice Department is there's so many people in the Justice Department that are compromised, by way of organized crime. That essentially there's no justice happening. So but this thing with these lawyers continually there's Ross McLeod continually filing these contempt orders when he darn well knows that he is in violation of the law, and he is bringing contempt orders against people who are not named in an order. Because he did this to J.R. Hull a year or so before he did it to me. And J.R. Hull and his attorney...
This is a representative in New Hampshire.
Right.
Yes, he wasn't a representative at the time, but he was a representative previous to this who basically, made it his duty and his job to absolutely reduce the government, the state of New Hampshire, to very much reduce their budget, to cut them down. As a state representative. So as soon as they got the chance,
that personally.
Right, as soon as he got a chance, the state of New Hampshire's goons got a chance to come against him. These guys literally, because he give his children ivermectin several months before, They showed up. They got an emergency order to remove his children. They literally showed up with, the equivalent of a SWAT team and ambulances to take his kids into custody.
Oh my God.
And because somebody had tipped him off that this was happening, he was able to get his kids out of Dodge. And he is he's actually working on suing, the state and going after them. And he had no interest in running for a state representative again until they, violated him so bad that he's like, well, I have to run for state representative
And
again.
is he one now?
Yeah, he currently is a state rep, yeah.
Nice.
He actually just introduced a bill, House Bill 1662, and it is one of my suggestions to him to essentially bar DCYF social workers from being involved in adoption agencies, essentially, because one of the things with my case, what multiple people had told me, and now 3 former New Hampshire DCYF social workers said, one huge element with you, Jay, is the fact that you had healthy, good-looking, unvaccinated children that are blonde and white.
I was
My
going to
son,
say,
for
what
example,
blonde hair, blue-eyed little kids would go for in Mexico or something?
Well, just the above board adoption marketplace, you would have to adopt a 6-month-old, 7-month-old healthy blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy. It's like $50,000 minimum, and there is a waiting list.
10 years,
people.
right?
Yeah, but there's a massive waiting. They are adoptable immediately. So the Child Protection Service industrial complex is basically run by a whole bunch of wokeified, LGBT, the mentally, incapacitated, these people suffering from mental health issue called transgenderism, whatever kind of stuff, that are, working in those jobs, and
what, the DCYF
yeah,
jobs?
just,
on
they're all
antidepressants or
right.
something.
They're just mentally ill people that have been furtherly made more mentally ill by attending all of these colleges that are funded by Jeffrey Epstein's friends. Just walk around any college where they have, the gender studies and the childhood stuff, and they're all funded by Gates Foundation and Clinton Foundation and MacArthur Foundation and just all these friends of Jeffrey Epstein, essentially, and they are of an agenda. So they're not breeders, is what a lot of these people will call themselves. We're not breeders, and
I love using that against people.
So they're not having children, and we know the left aren't having children. We just tell by the statistics they're basically not having kids because they're just not into having kids. Yeah, it's problematic. And especially when you have, gay or lesbian couples, they kind of really can't have kids.
What's problematic? The left thinks having kids is problematic?
Yes.
By the way, Olu, did you need to go or did you have anything else to say? I didn't want to keep you on the whole segment. If
no worries. I'm going to go in a minute, but one more thing is there's a way to easily stop the government from doing things, from punishing people without due process, which I wrote a book on, presumed guilty last year. And they punish people without due process by saying it's an emergency. We don't have time for a hearing to hear the other side, so let's just punish him now and sort it out later at a hearing in a few months. Guess what? There are things like video cameras and programs like Zoom and many others that you can use to video chat and get someone immediately, and they're already doing court cases like this. There are plenty of video hearings. They can do this.
So you're saying they need to put in a bill for that or something?
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for the call. A very interesting epiphany, and hopefully somebody takes up your bill ideas because they're really smart ideas. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. Jeffrey Epstein News coming up next.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country.
Yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing. To be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone. Police have responded to a shooting at a high school in the U.S. state of Iowa, where there are reports that multiple people have been shot. The police have declined to say how many people are injured or if there are any fatalities. Here's Dallas County Sheriff Adam Infante.
The officer first arrived within 7 minutes of that activation and located multiple gunshot victims. We're still unclear of exactly how many are injured or what the extent of those are, but we're working on that right now.
Well, the shooter has been identified and is believed to have died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is headed to the Middle East for continued diplomatic discussions on the Israel-Gaza war. His trip to a number of countries, including Israel, comes as the Israeli army withdraws thousands of troops from the Palestinian Strip and shifts to lower-intensity military operations, following a ground offensive in the Hamas-run territory. But the conflict also shows signs of escalating into the wider region after a suspected Israeli strike on a Hamas leader in Lebanon, twin Islamic State bombings in Iran, and Iran-funded Houthi militants attacking ships in the Red Sea. Benji Hire reports.
Antony Blinken is again engaging in a whistle-stop tour in an effort to calm tensions. That as President Joe Biden's national security team convenes in the White House to review possible military options against what the US calls the destabilizing actions of Houthi rebels. The Biden administration is also weighing a proposal to name a new top diplomat to focus on long-term Israeli-Palestinian relations, easing some of the day-to-day pressure off of the president during an election year. Benji Hire, Washington.
The first black president of Harvard University has described a right-wing campaign that led to her resignation from the post as part of a broader war to unravel public faith and pillars of American society. Claudine Gay resigned after criticism centered on allegations of anti-Semitism on campus and plagiarism in her academic work. US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
Writing in the New York Times, Claudine Gay argued that her invitation to testify to Congress about anti-Semitism on elite college campuses had been, quote, a well-laid trap, and that the campaign against her was about more than just one university and one leader. She said she regretted not speaking forcefully enough against anti-Semitism, but she defended her scholarship. The campaign to oust her has been widely criticised as racist, and she said her inbox had been flooded with death threats and that she'd repeatedly been called the N-word. Kate Fisher, Washington.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control. 603-283-6160 is the phone number. That's 603-283-6160. And I wanted to tell you about Dash. Dash is sponsoring this hour of Free Talk Live. Digital cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Rising fees have made Bitcoin useless for purchases, but Dash continues to have fees less than 1 cent per transaction, and its features ensure Dash is undefeated as the most useful cryptocurrency in the marketplace. From a technical standpoint, Dash transactions are irreversible, and its network is protected from 51% attacks by their Chainlocks technology. There's no need to wait for a confirmation before considering a Dash transaction complete, so it's great for merchants. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges including the decentralized Maya protocol and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at dash.org. Big thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn more about Dash. That's dash.org. And with you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
Jay Noon.
And Mark Edge.
And I just realized on my own, that I didn't have Mark up on the screen. So if you're watching the streams, you can now see Mark's beautiful face.
Indeed.
So in the last segment, we had teased it but didn't get into it. I'm not really sure what's new about this. I've only scanned it a bit. Apparently, Alu said someone named Dan Bongino is covering it in detail, and when I Googled that to see who it was, he tweeted, "Oh, this is a bombshell revelation. Watch my episode to get deep into what all of this means." So maybe you could go there, but
most of these clickbaity headlines for these videos are very, very disappointing.
About Jeffrey Epstein?
No, just this bombshell revelation, and then you're like, I listened to some YouTube videos as I
Today?
work and travel. Yeah, today I listened to a couple. That's kind of, I don't have like time to sit there and read, and I don't watch them, but you know, like for example, the last 3 days I was doing a whole bunch of tree work and firewood, so I got my wireless ear protection earmuffs on, and I'm listening to like YouTube videos, and just the phones sitting on a tractor, and I got my earphones on, and
I do that like all day too, like I'm vacuuming or whatever, and I'm listening to, recently my thing has been Eckhart Tolle, but sometimes it's political things, whatever. But I just thought you meant you heard about this Jeffrey Epstein stuff.
yeah, so I've listened to a handful of these things, and like these guys just go on and on about like not a whole bunch, just in general. Not like, I don't know about Dan Bongino. I didn't listen to what his, his thing was, but there's just so many clickbaity headlines, especially about like, oh, the economy is going into a free fall crash, doom and gloom. And then they're like, and their whole video is pretty much just a segue for take my course on how to protect yourself and invest.
Or like buy silver through my website or something.
Things like that.
Well, the thing that seems to be new in the Jeffrey Epstein case says that the identities of dozens of well-known figures linked to Jeffrey Epstein have been revealed in court papers unsealed in the U.S. overnight. I'm just a little confused because I've already heard of these names. So what was it, just a rumor before and now it's official? It says high-profile people such as Prince William, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Al Gore, Kevin Spacey, and Stephen Hawking were included in evidence filings. Actors Leonardo, Kate Blanchett, Cameron Diaz, and Bruce Willis are in there along with model Naomi Campbell. None of them have been accused of any involvement in Epstein's crimes, but Epstein was a name dropper. Johanna Sjoberg claimed in evidence released overnight. Ms. Sjoberg was clear that she never had met them. So we can get into it.
So here's my commentary on this. Just because their names are dropped doesn't mean they had anything to do with it or they were a bad actor. Like, for example, in my, lawsuit against the state of New Hampshire, it's going to include all kinds of names. One of the names that's going to be said multiple times in the documents is, Matthew French, chief of police, Henniker Police Department. And his name's going to be said in it because he was involved in it. He was like one of the good guys. He's not being sued. He's essentially like, was someone who was, protecting my rights, protecting my family, doing what was right.
But that is, it seems that could be a bit different because
it could be.
A lot of people who are completely unfamiliar with the court system at all might be like, oh, their name is in there at all. It must mean something. But I think this is just a different type of evidence because this person who knew him came out with this new evidence. But before we get into it, I do want to go to the phones because someone's on the line. Unscreened caller. You're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Hey, this is Rusty from Portland.
Hello, Rusty.
I wanted to address Jay Noon. You have claimed several times that all heroin and fentanyl users are on welfare.
So I have claimed that.
Wait, I don't think you really claimed that. You claimed that
I have said that before.
All heroin.
Well, here's a little advice for adults. Whenever somebody says all, they mean most.
Yeah.
But let me clarify this for you. So he's not wrong in his statement. I have said all heroin and fentanyl users are on heroin.
On welfare.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, on welfare. Now, what's the caller's name?
Rusty.
Rusty. To clarify, what is a more accurate statement, and I've said this too, is go ask a first responder. If so the statement, really, the accurate statement is which I have stated also. So that all heroin and fentanyl users are on welfare is a statement I've said, and it's an ignorant statement.
Okay.
It's actually not accurate. Because I do happen to know, for example, guys that work construction that aren't on welfare that are using heroin, and I've seen them, shoot up on the job site. I witnessed one guy with a paving crew on the side of an interstate highway. In his truck, as I was working on the paver, I open up the door of the truck to go talk to the boss who was in the passenger side of the truck.
Was he like nodding out?
And the dude in the driver's seat of the truck, who was a CDL truck driver. And a good standing license, literally was putting heroin into his arm, was injecting heroin, and he's not on welfare. Now, the correct statement that I've said is that ask any first responder about Narcamming, giving Narcan to people who are overdosing.
It's Narcan with an N.
Oh, Narcan. Ask any first responder. So I have asked a whole bunch of first responders. Out of all the people that you have witnessed overdose, either you've given them Narcan, or you have put them in a body bag that have overdosed on opiates.
Right. I wanted to address that because you've mentioned that you've talked to like ambulance drivers, and they all say the overdose
One just called.
have EBT cards.
Yep.
And well, first of all, just because you have an EBT card in your wallet does not mean you're on welfare. Lots of people have old EBT cards in their wallet. But
well, an EBT card is a form of welfare.
He's just saying it could be expired.
They're currently on welfare.
Oh, okay.
Well, all right.
Like if you, according to like a national study that was done between 2008 and 2012, 55% of all people with substance abuse disorders are employed. Like the first responders are usually dealing with the worst of the worst. Like if you're overdosing on a regular basis or even at all, like anybody can overdose anytime, right? But it's more
probably most people won't overdose on fentanyl because they're not doing it.
Well, a lot of people are doing fentanyl, but they may not know it because it's heroin. Like, I have a friend who wasn't the worst of the worst. He's not, like, trashed. He lived in a nice suburban house with his parents, only with his parents at 22 because the government had went after him and made his life terrible and miserable for selling weed. And then he wasn't allowed to do anything for years because he's on probation. The day he got off of it, he was like, I want to do a drug. Did heroin, quote unquote, with his friend and overdosed and died on fentanyl. He's not the worst of the worst. He wasn't on welfare as far as I knew. But he died of fentanyl. I mean, I don't think anybody should be speaking in terms of all. Like, I feel like didn't you just say, or did I mishear you, that all fentanyl users are employed?
No, 55% of substance.
55% of people with substance abuse disorder, that's all drugs.
Which could be alcohol, which could be weed, which could be, I don't know, you might as well include caffeine and tobacco in that. I mean, they're substances.
But they're probably not the government definition.
Right. I mean, obviously welfare needs to be abolished, but these are some of the most oppressed, screwed over people in America. I mean, they're constantly locked in cages and stolen from by the government, and the reason they need so much money to buy their drugs in the first place is because prohibition has artificially inflated the prices. So if anybody deserves welfare, it's probably them.
Well, I agree with your assessment that that's why that these people are really oppressed for their choice of drug. Like, we don't oppress alcohol users in the same way, and it's a very dangerous drug. But Rusty, I have a really interesting question to ask you because my sister's boyfriend's also from Oregon, and he is always railing about, like, he's more like a right-winger, and he's always railing about, like, obviously legalizing drugs was a bad idea because look at Portland. Well, what do you have to say about that? I always tell him, well, you have a lot of, like, messed up laws already in Portland, like no guns, a bunch of welfare. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, the drug crisis, the fentanyl crisis was coming to Portland whether we decriminalize drugs or not. Like, and I think they around 2020 or so, like support for criminal justice reform was at like all-time high, right? But they swung too far in the other direction to where they made it to where if you get arrested for any kind of crime, like crimes with victims, like stealing stuff, breaking into cars, they weren't locking these people up. They're still letting them right back out. Like and that's one of the main drivers of the crime here. Like, it's not necessarily the drug decriminalization. Like, you can stop locking people up for victimless crimes, but to also not lock people up for crimes that have a victim is a bad idea. Like that, and it just makes it look all bad because people lump it all together.
I see. You're saying Portland just has a crime problem. It's not necessarily a drug problem only. Well, that makes sense.
They're soft on all kinds of crime. Like, but I don't think the drug decriminalization alone is a problem. It's a combination of things, and the city is horrible with money. They've always been a poorly managed city, and it was going to come to a head eventually. But I mean, there's cities in other places in the country that have not decriminalized drugs that are just as bad to live in.
That's very, very true.
And it's not like you're walking down the street in the middle of the day here and you're going to get robbed. Like, it's not that crazy. I mean, there's places you don't want to go like late at night, but it's, yeah.
When I was in Portland, I didn't feel unsafe. What I felt like was this is a once great city that is now covered in garbage and poo.
Yeah.
That sucks. Well, thank you so much for the call, Rusty. I really appreciate that. Did you have something you wanted to ask him?
Well, with the respect of like welfare, so I would like say disability, for example, is welfare. So I personally know many people that I would consider my peer group, let's say 10 to 15 years older than me and 10 to 15 years younger than me. And they got into opiates, many of them because they got an injury, like a legitimate injury, and the doctor prescribed them, like one particular fella, Vicodin. And he, like, the Vicodin grabbed a hold of this dude really, really hard. And he was like a good, solid dude. His family had a really good, like, tire business. He was also like a little bit involved in agricultural things, and we were sort of like did a lot of business with each other, you know, on the ag side. And anyways, and he was a pretty good friend of mine. Like, he was a good friend of mine, and I watched him go from, like, you know, I knew him before this injury. And so he's like working a straight job. He's working his side hustle. He's doing really good. He's like acquiring, like, he's doing well. And he gets injured, and they're giving him Vicodin, and basically he had a shoulder injury, and he had like a couple surgeries, and then it got to the point to where he's like, now he's qualifies for disability, and so he basically is and he's like snorting Vicodins, you know, at this time, and like his like teeth are getting bad, and he's like getting really skinny, and you can just tell that, like, you know, he wasn't doing well, and he wasn't thriving. It's actually really sad because he got like married, he had a couple of kids, and his parents sort of enabled him a little bit. So that
doesn't happen in America.
Yeah. So but this guy got on disability, and basically and like his so he, like, you know, he made a lot of money, like when he was making money, and so he got on disability at, like, I don't know, I guess he's like literally about same age as me. So it was like 33, 34. He got on disability, and his parents said the worst thing that happened to him was he got on disability. As soon as he got on disability, you know, he went from crushing up Vicodins to snorting it to like, and he explained this to me one day. He's like, well, then I started, you know, putting it into, like, injecting it, and he was telling me about that procedure. Like, I don't know if he's injecting Vicodin or like heroin. And then it just got to the point to where he's like buying street heroin. And, so like the wife divorces him. The kids are like, it got real problematic for the kids. Like the grandparents basically like sort of like lost the business. The parents lost the business, lost a couple of family properties over this deal, and it's a huge mess. I'm not even sure if the guy's still alive, but I know like so many like hardworking good dudes that got injured. The doctors prescribed them the opiates. The dopamine hit from the opiate essentially just ruled their life after that. And and then when they got on disability, then it got really, really, really bad because they didn't actually have to get up and go to work.
That makes so much sense.
Because they got disability, they got the Section 8 housing. And
yeah, they know that money's coming every month, and they just get comfortable with that level of whatever it is.
And on disability, you can't earn too much, right?
Right. You're not allowed to earn out over a certain amount on paper.
But you also don't need to prove. Okay, so that's the other thing too. His side hustle, you just go do that as a cash cow. So he would so it's like another one of the things that like you can do on disability is you can flip the drugs because now when you're a drug addict, you're familiar with the marketplace. So that was like one of the things that this guy was allegedly doing. I don't know that he was doing it for fact, but you hear stories like just assumed and believed it. So he was like trafficking the narcotics himself as part of his like side hustle, and then he had a trucking company, and like he literally just liquidated like I don't know, like hundreds of thousands of dollars like of equipment for like not a lot of money because he was just so addicted that basically when his disability money ran out, he would just start selling tools, and he would even call me, hey, you want to buy I remember this air compressor he wanted to sell me one day that he knew I knew about, and I called his dad, and his dad's like, no, don't give him any money, you can't give him any money, he's
my gosh.
He's a full-blown junkie, don't give him any money.
And what's sad about this story is that that's a totally legal drug that Big Pharma makes that a doctor gave to him, and there are just probably so many better ways to do this type of thing, like manage someone's pain than to give them something that's heroin light.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I wanted to make one more point. I feel like now, as far as like functioning opiate addicts go nowadays, it's almost more of them are actually working versus like 10, 15 years ago, thanks to like the gig economy, because whereas before, if opiate addict was like unable to get their drugs one day and they're sick, they might not show up for work and they get fired. Now they can do like DoorDash or Uber or whatever and work when they want. And the flexibility of that has allowed more drug addicts to actually work.
So, Rusty, you are not the first guy to correct me on my statement that all heroin users are collecting welfare.
I guess I just didn't understand you as saying all, but okay.
Well, I did say that before.
Mm-hmm.
It was an ignorant statement. And because I literally have had people that I've worked with that are like, I am a opiate user. I maintain my job. Like people have sent me text messages and I'm like, you shouldn't send this kind of message in a text message. Use something encrypted. But check out ibogaine.com if you want to get off heroin. Ibogaine clinics, they got these clinics in Mexico where they give you ibogaine, and it's like a whole week-long thing. It's like $10,000, and it's resets your dopamine receptors, like basically back to the time you were born. So when you're done with it, you're not interested in alcohol, you're not interested in porn addictions, you're not interested in like opiates, all kinds of stuff.
And of course, it's illegal in the United States.
Right.
Yep.
Schedule 1.
I was going to say like the worst kind of illegal, Schedule 1.
And so like I have like I got another friend I went to high school with. Great guy. Oh man, I love this guy. It's so heartbreaking, to think about some of this stuff. But he was one that he heard me. I don't know. He heard through Facebook or something, that I'd said this, or somebody clipped something of what I was doing and put it up somewhere. And he's like, he calls me. He's like, hey, it's so and so. You remember me? I'm like, hell yeah, I remember you, buddy. How you doing? He's like, I do coke every weekend and I function just fine. and I'm like, and I'm like, aren't you like divorced? And you're like, yeah. He's like, screw that B, but
my goodness.
And he's just like, yeah, I'm fine. I just, I buy an 8-ball every Saturday night or whatever he was telling me about. And he's like, and he has, and he told me the reason that he got into doing coke is because he had some kind of like thing happen. And this guy's in Massachusetts. He had some kind of thing happen years ago where he was going to get quizzed, urine sampled for cannabis use, for marijuana. And
so he started coke.
Well, he started doing coke because it either doesn't show up or it wasn't part of the test. I don't. Well, from what I from actually he told me is that like coke is all out of your system like within a couple of days, and like THC can be like show
30
up
days,
even 60 days it can still be in your system, especially if you like do a fast or you're like kind of like you lose some fat and the THC was stored in the fat. It will show up in your system even if you hadn't used a THC in like 60 days. That's what he told me. But basically that's what got him.
Yeah, the government has literally incentivized hard drug use by putting however many people they've put on probation and parole over the years, and they know they can't smoke pot because it's in their system too long, so they do hard drugs instead.
And this particular guy's like, you shouldn't talk bad about doing cocaine unless you try it. It's a lot of fun, man. You should try it.
I don't deny that it's probably a lot of fun, but I've still never tried it because it sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, it's got very poor reviews. That's why I'm not into it.
The other thing is that a lot of people have told me it's like when I was in high school, I did like Adderall, and I remember this feeling of being like, oh, I want to do it again as soon as it's over. And people say that it's like that, but a million times. Like as soon as you're not high on cocaine, you're like, I know it's 2 a.m., but I got to hit up the dealer. Like I need more.
Yep.
And I don't want to do that.
My crackhead uncle begged and pleaded with me as a child. He was like 12, 13-year-old kid, as he's like sold all his tools and all his stuff again, because he would like do a bunch of crack, sell everything, have nothing left, and then not do crack for 4 or 5 months. And then as soon as he had like a big chunk of a couple $1,000s, he just went and did crack, and then he would just do crack for like weeks until all of his stuff was sold. I watched this guy do this over and over again.
Whoa.
And he's like, yep, don't ever do it. It's a monster that just keep calling you back. And so due to those poor reviews, expressed to me by my uncle, I've been offered that stuff multiple times over the years. And every time I'm offered to it, all I can think about is my uncle saying it's a monster and it keeps calling you back.
I believe it.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you so much for the call, Rusty. 603-283-6160. What do you think? Do you think the United States should make some of these things more legal? Are they incentivizing harder drugs by the marijuana crackdown? 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up.
Never, ever send a follow-up email asking, "Did you get my email?" Email 101. If it didn't bounce back undeliverable, it got where you sent it. And avoid transmedia pestering, like calling to ask, "Did you get my email?" or emailing to say, "I left you a voicemail." If your emails and voicemails aren't being acknowledged, your problem isn't technology, it's technique. Is your message concise and understandable? Have you boiled it down to seem as relevant as possible to the recipient? In other words, is it the opposite of spam or junk mail? All of this really matters if you're a job seeker. But even if you're not, with money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone? You forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection, you can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone. Police have responded to a shooting at a high school in the US state of Iowa, where there are reports that multiple people have been shot. The police have declined to say how many people are injured or if there are any fatalities. Here's Dallas County Sheriff Adam Infante.
The officer first arrived within 7 minutes of that activation and located multiple gunshot victims. We're still unclear of exactly how many are injured or what the extent of those are, but we're working on that right now.
Well, the shooter has been identified and is believed to have died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is headed to the Middle East for continued diplomatic discussions on the Israel-Gaza war. His trip to a number of countries, including Israel, comes as the Israeli army withdraws thousands of troops from the Palestinian Strip and shifts to lower-intensity military operations, following a ground offensive in the Hamas-run territory. But the conflict also shows signs of escalating into the wider region after a suspected Israeli strike on a Hamas leader in Lebanon, twin Islamic State bombings in Iran, and Iran-funded Houthi militants attacking ships in the Red Sea. Benji Hire reports.
Antony Blinken is again engaging in a whistle-stop tour in an effort to calm tensions. That as President Joe Biden's national security team convenes in the White House to review possible military options against what the US calls the destabilizing actions of Houthi rebels. The Biden administration is also weighing a proposal to name a new top diplomat to focus on long-term Israeli-Palestinian relations, easing some of the day-to-day pressure off of the president during an election year. Benji Hire, Washington.
The first black president of Harvard University has described a right-wing campaign that led to her resignation from the post as part of a broader war to unravel public faith and pillars of American society. Claudine Gay resigned after criticisms centred on allegations of anti-Semitism on campus and plagiarism in her academic work. US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
Writing in the New York Times, Claudine Gay argued that her invitation to testify to Congress about anti-Semitism on elite college campuses had been, quote, a well-laid trap, and that the campaign against her was about more than just one university and one leader. She said she regretted not speaking forcefully enough against anti-Semitism, but she defended her scholarship. The campaign to oust her has been widely criticised as racist, and she said her inbox had been flooded with death threats and that she'd repeatedly been called the N-word. Kate Fisher, Washington.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at Israel's military strategy. Now the new year is underway, and the world appears to have witnessed the first targeted killing of a Hamas leader in what seems to have been an Israeli drone strike. Salah al-Aruri died on Tuesday in Beirut. He's credited with being one of Hamas's top tacticians and would have been very high on Israel's hit list in the aftermath of last October's Hamas attacks that killed more than 1,400 Israelis. So is this a sign that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is now ordering the more targeted strikes that US officials have been demanding in the wake of a mounting civilian death toll in Gaza? Noga Tarnopolsky is a freelance reporter based in Tel Aviv.
It appears that the really intense period of hand-to-hand, door-to-door urban fighting is winding down, but the Israeli government isn't saying a word. So all I can tell you is what we see, which is thousands of reservists coming back home. You can't hide that. But it's interesting that the United States government has said more about this than the Israeli government.
Prime Minister Netanyahu says his military occupation of Gaza will continue for months after 85% of the territory's population was displaced and 20,000 people killed in the weeks since Israel's reprisals began. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again. Multiple victims have been reported at a US high school shooting in the state of Iowa. The US's top diplomat is en route to the Middle East for more talks, as concern continues over an escalation in violence beyond Israel and Gaza. And the first black president of Harvard says the campaign that led to her resignation is part of a broader war. There's more from us on Twitter at Feature Story, and that's the latest from Feature Story News. Caroline Malone reporting.
Shortly after posting for the 10,000th time on his Twitter account earlier today, despite only ever accumulating 15 followers, local man Aaron Gartner announced he's about ready to quit the popular microblogging site.
Well, I opened my account about 2 years ago and tweeted pretty much every day since, and it didn't really turn out like I expected. I thought, once I hit 8,000 tweets, I could get some traction, start getting more followers, but it never really happened. I mean, I gave it my best shot, I guess, but I think I'm about done here.
He has yet to be followed by anyone beyond a handful of friends, family members, and seemingly inactive accounts.
This one time I tweeted out a pretty good joke about how out of control Lindsay Lohan is, and it actually got me a retweet. It was from this guy in Argentina I don't know, who doesn't have any followers, and he's not following anyone else. Oh, hold on a sec. Apparently my aunt's following me now. Cool.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control. You can call in at 603-283-6160. That number is 603-283-6160. And I want to tell you about ForkFest 2024. Join liberty-minded voluntarists, anarchists, and libertarians from June 13th through the 16th for the 8th annual ForkFest at Rogers Campground in the beautiful White Mountains of New Hampshire. ForkFest is a fork of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, which has sold out in recent years. ForkFest happens the weekend before the Porcupine Freedom Festival. ForkFest is decentralized, which means that there's no ticket cost and no one is in charge. All you have to do to join the fun is reserve your camping site, RV site, or motel room with Rogers Campground for June 13th through the 16th. You can find out more at the unofficial website, forkfest.party. You can also connect with other attendees on the ForkFest Telegram and Matrix chat rooms, as well as the ForkFest forum. You can find links to both of those at forkfest.party. We hope to see you there June 13th through the 16th. Forkfest.party. And with you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
Jay Noon.
Uh-oh.
Oh, we can't hear Mark, but he's there somewhere.
Yeah, I have him unmuted, but suddenly I can't hear Mark. But Mark is here with us from...
I am here with you.
Oh, there you go.
My fault.
It's okay. I wanted to also tell you about one other announcement. On Friday, January 12th, we're having... And Mark, this is New Hampshire news. I hope you don't mind, but Ian wants me to remind people that on Friday, January 12th, there are 2 secession bill hearings in the New Hampshire Legislative Office Building. It's going to be at room 206-208, so they put it in one of the larger rooms at 9:30 a.m. and 10:15 a.m. respectively. You can go there and voice your support. It's the most effective way, I believe, is to go in person and tell the committee, I support this bill, I support secession. One of them is the bill that will amend the Constitution. The people will be able to vote on it to amend the Constitution to say, oh, if the national debt reaches $40 trillion, then we secede. It's like a trigger for secession. And the second one starts a study committee to figure out some answers to certain things about secession. So very important bills. But we did talk about the Jeffrey Epstein thing. I think the only thing I really have to say about that right now, because the headline is like you're saying, like it's one of those things that seem, it's like whenever WikiLeaks would put out something new, people are like, oh my gosh, a new WikiLeaks drop. But a lot of times it was a new WikiLeaks drop, but not really new information. That is basically what this is. The judge said today and did release unseal some things about the Jeffrey Epstein case, but it doesn't look like anything new is out. It's just saying what we already knew about some celebrities having visited the island. And it's interesting. And the other thing about it is that more will be rolling out. That's how they set it up. So like in several weeks, more will be unsealed and then more and more. So that's all that there was really to say about the Epstein story. But this is from...
I want to know, is that island ever going to go up for sale? I mean, this guy's been dead for a while.
Might be haunted.
And,
I don't believe he's dead.
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe he's there.
He's not at the island.
Yeah, I doubt he's not going there because that's a hotbed. But yeah,
Somebody's going to be like, I saw his ghost. I bought the island. And I swear I'm seeing his ghost.
Shoot, it's sold without me knowing. Financier buys Epstein's private island with plans to create a resort.
Oh my gosh, I was going to joke about that. I was going to say you should make it a tourist attraction, like come to Jeffrey Epstein's island and see where the kids were tortured. That's crazy.
71-acre property. I mean, what I'd want to know is, I bet they couldn't clean that thing. Whatever's there, there's something there. There's some incriminating evidence there.
They probably couldn't spiritually clean it.
Well, that could be too.
It looks like we have a caller. Chuck from Washington, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you said the trigger word there, Epstein. All day long I've been listening to this Epstein thing play out. And really, what I think here is happening is, and Alex Jones did his victory lap on a show today. Everybody's jumping down this Alex Jones not foxhole. Some people might need a foxhole, but
rabbit hole.
A rabbit. Exactly. They're jumping down this thing, and really, what I think here is happening is there's some kind of unresolved sexual issue that people are having with this. I don't know if it's unfulfilled desire to do whatever, but they are paying a lot of attention to this, and I think you will probably end up seeing this kind of thing take over the place of JonBenet Ramsey. And all of she's still making headlines in 2023. And I just can't imagine this thing going away for another 50 years, depending on who's involved. Yeah, that's all I need to say. Thank you.
So your idea is just that people seem to be really obsessed with this because you think they have a sexually unresolved issue that makes them really interested in it. That's creepy but possible. Not creepy on his part, but it's creepy to think about, but that is definitely a possible reason why people are so obsessed with this. And speaking of places that can't sell, I learned just the other day from a Joe Rogan episode, which I'm not like I don't hate him or something. I just don't like sit around listening to Joe Rogan usually, but he had my favorite YouTubers, Sam and Colby, on. Well, Joe Rogan was saying that the JonBenet Ramsey house can't sell because people don't want to live in the house where a little girl was murdered, which makes sense. So speaking of...
Was she murdered there? I thought they lost her and didn't know where she went.
I don't know.
Yeah, they never found her, I believe.
That's weird.
I don't know.
And then there's like a conspiracy theory that Lady Gaga is actually JonBenet.
No, it's Katy Perry. But
Katy
yeah,
Perry. Okay,
I don't believe it really, and I am not one of those people who don't believe any conspiracy theories. Like I definitely believe some conspiracy theories, but I just have looked so many times. They both have. She's naturally blonde. You might not know that Katy Perry is naturally blonde because she's like famous for having black hair, but she's naturally blonde, has big blue eyes, but she just doesn't look enough like her for me. But it could be plastic surgery, but it is really interesting, crazy.
Yeah, I don't really have an opinion, but just something I heard. And I didn't even have it right. I said the wrong name.
Oh, yeah. I don't really expect you to know the differences between all of the top teen pop star music makers.
I don't pay attention to that
Good
stuff.
news, because I don't.
But, so we have this story from Wall Street Journal. It's an opinion piece. And it says, electric mandates have California truckers charging overtime. They haul lighter loads and spend hours plugged in. consumers will ultimately foot the bill, of course. So it's something that the government of California has done, but the consumers and taxpayers are going to foot the bill for this dumb idea.
So this is, you're talking about semi trucks.
Yep.
Like that are hauling all the produce.
That are electric.
Like, California produces like a lot. It's a huge portion of the fruit and vegetables consumed throughout the United States. And they have gotten so ridiculous that I know that like you right now, if you have like a pre-2010 like semi truck or commercial truck, you cannot go into California with it unless it's like been upgraded with like, so like one of these semi trucks, they have to be upgraded with like all this crazy emission stuff.
Even if you're not working?
Well, if it's a recreational, I think you're exempt. But like if you're like a commercial trucker and like you're going to go haul like, I don't know, some hay to California from say Texas or Arizona, and pick, or you're just going there with your refrigerator truck to pick up some produce to, you know, the haul back to, you know, the East Coast or something or wherever, some city somewhere out, you know, you can't go into California if your truck is older than 2010 unless you do like a $35,000 sort of upgrade to these trucks, which is, you know, has to do with all the emission systems. And then the emission systems on these trucks make these trucks extremely unreliable. And then also, so now there's a mandate pushing that you have to have all these electric trucks.
Mm-hmm.
So was there any more you wanted to read on that?
Well, I had no idea that there were even electric semi trucks. That seems kind of crazy. Like, and it makes sense that it says that they're having to haul lighter loads because it just sounds like, well, it doesn't sound strong enough to haul around, you know, imagine a 16-wheeler.
18-wheeler, yep.
18-wheeler. It seems like that is just too big for like an electric little motor. I don't know. You guys have more. Mark has electric vehicle experience.
Yeah, well, I do, but I don't make any positive statements with Jay on the show when it comes to vehicles. What the question I'd ask is, wouldn't an electric motor be able to produce more torque?
Oh,
just not a lot of speed.
Absolutely. So the electric motors, like electric drive, is the way to go. So like all your freight trains, your modern freight trains are what are called diesel electric hybrid. The Euclid rock trucks that can carry like 50 or 100 tons of rock, the big mining trucks that are like 18 foot wide and 20 foot tall and 40 foot long, like you know the classic Tonka truck that a kid plays with.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that, but it can carry, you know, 50 or 60 tons of rock. That's called like a rock truck. So those things don't have transmissions. They have huge diesel engines with generators, and then they have a series of controllers and wires that run to what they call the hub-mounted motors. Trains are the same way.
Why is it that they would be saying that these truckers in California have to?
Because they're not diesel electric hybrids. They just are battery powered.
Yeah.
So batteries are extremely heavy, and these trucks are and it's also hardcore government subsidized. Like there's big subsidies by the state of California, by the federal government to create this. Well, this is a pretty good thing to talk about here because yesterday, Ernest Hancock and I actually did a podcast with a guy named Chase Barber.
Ernest Hancock of Declare Your Independence. He's on the Free Talk Live radio network with us now, and he's on Mondays. So
if you want to listen, so Chase Barber is from Edison Motors out of British Columbia, Canada. So Chase Barber is a logger. He had a logging business. What a great guy. If you want to watch some of his YouTube videos, Edison Motors on YouTube, edisonmotors.ca. He's a Canadian outfit is his website. If you are like into cars, into trucks, if you like really enjoy how your Prius drives, and the first time I drove a Prius was last summer. So a friend of mine let me borrow his Prius to come down here and do the show. And when I got home, I said, hey man, I want my truck to be like this Prius because the Prius has what's called is a hybrid. So it has an internal combustion engine that's basically hooked up to a generator, and then it has a battery pack. And so what happens when you're driving a Prius? Now, Mark has a lot of miles and hours in driving a Prius. I think you guys have had a couple different Priuses, right, Mark?
No, just I've just had the one Prius, and it's almost 250,000 miles on it.
There you go. So
anyway, by the way, I'll say this about Priuses. One thing that nobody ever says is I love driving a Prius. It's a pretty boring car generally, but I have had no trouble with it.
Oh,
Well, you
it's
mean
an
it for-
amazing car to drive.
You don't mean it as in it's fun. You mean that it's like really good for mileage, right?
It's just super practical.
Hmm.
So like there's no transmission to service. There's no clutch to repair. You basically don't ever have to put brakes on them if you learn how to drive it correctly and you drive them properly, because it does what's called regenerative braking. So
you have to replace the brakes every 150,000 miles. Otherwise, they just kind of seize up or something.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. The brakes never wear out. They just seize up due to
just get
not
old.
using them. So basically, if you drive that Prius correctly, the only time you really ever apply the actual brakes is like 5 feet from the stop sign, essentially. So, or if like somebody runs out in front of you and you have to, or step on your brakes for some kind of emergency reason. So anyways, getting back to Edison Motors, we interviewed Chase Barber. If you go to freedomsphoenix.com and you click on the top right where it says declare your independence with Ernest Hancock, and it has Ernest Hancock's cursive signature up there, that is all of his shows, and you can actually listen to that. That's where the archives are, and you can listen to that show. I'm sure it's up on either an MP3 or an MP4. And what's really nice is you can just listen to freedomsphoenix.com, the MP3 file, and like you can just and you can download it to your phone, and then you can be offline and listen. That's one thing I really like about it. So like when you're traveling around New Hampshire all day, you can listen to that, and it doesn't get interrupted. There's an option not to stream, or there's a video you can watch of me, Chase, and Ernie. So the video actually might be good for some people who aren't really into cars, kind of understand some of the things that we talked about a little bit. But what these guys did, Edison Motors, is they actually make let me get back to how the EV hybrid works. So the EV hybrid has an internal combustion engine, whether it's gas or diesel, it doesn't matter, a generator hooked to it. So the truck or the car has electric hub drive or electric motors on the axles. Now, electric motors make massive torque. Like they make their maximum torque at 0 RPM, to where like the engine in your Honda Civic, for example, makes its like most torque at like 3/4 into the RPM range. So if your Honda Civic idles at 1,000 RPMs and red lines at 7,000 RPMs, is making its maximum torque somewhere around 5,000 RPMs. It's consuming a lot of gasoline at 5,000 RPMs. That's just the way internal combustion gas engine works. Diesel engines make their maximum torque very low in the RPM range, usually about less than halfway into the RPM range. So the diesel engine in my Dodge Cummins pickup truck makes like 600 foot-pounds of torque at 1,400 RPM, but its red line is like 2,800 RPM, idles at about 600 RPM.
And you're saying that just all that means that
torque is the ability to move something.
But you're saying that all that means that it can move something without using as much gas?
So here's the thing. So let's talk about semi-trucks for the purpose of this discussion. So semi-trucks, like the 53-foot or the 18-wheelers that you see driving around, they are generally freighted out to weighing 80,000 pounds.
Whoa.
Generally, most of those trucks weigh between 19 to like 30,000 pounds empty, depending on how they're spec'd. So if you weigh like 20,000 pounds on an empty semi-truck, you can put 60,000 pounds of cargo in it and drive down the road legally.
And it's terrifying.
If you have overweight permits, that same semi-truck in certain areas is good for 105,000 pounds. If you have a Tridem drive or a tri-axle trailer, you can be like 120,000 pounds. A guy who delivered me an excavator this summer delivered me an 84,000 pound excavator that I worked on for a friend, and he delivered it on a truck that was designed to max out at like 175,000 pounds. It's a big old truck with lots of axles and tires. So anyways, these trucks have big, powerful 500 horsepower diesel engines. A 500 horsepower diesel engine is literally the equivalent of a 15 horsepower gasoline engine when it comes to pulling, because of the torque that a diesel engine makes. Well, the thing is you need all that 500 horsepower and that 2,400 foot-pounds of torque that big Caterpillar diesel engine in a semi-truck produces to get that 80,000 pound moving up the hills and get it going. But once you get up to cruising speed, you really only need like 200 horsepower or 150 horsepower. And this is kind of the same thing with all cars. Well, here in New Hampshire, we have a lot of hills. So when you're driving your EV, you're going down the hill, you can do what's called regenerative braking. So like when you're driving your Prius or your EV semi-truck or your Tesla truck, you can, when you let off the gas and just touch the brake just a little bit, there's a little thing on a dash. It'll show that like a light or an arrow is going from the wheel motors to the batteries. It shows that you're charging the batteries. That's called regenerative braking. And
well,
then if
Jay, just to be clear, on the Prius specifically, there is a gear, let's call it, because it's on the gear shift.
Yep.
They call it brake,
right.
and this, what it does is applies the brake as you're talking about, a small extent, and it regenerates as you're going down hills. Because sometimes in New Hampshire, the hills will be so steep that you'll get going too fast. Obviously, the best form of fuel economy is the speed that you have. You don't want to store it in a battery. You want to use it. But at some point, you'll get up to, going down a hill at 80 miles an hour, and you don't want to do that. So you put this on, and that just grabs at least some of the power that is being generated.
And when I drove that Prius, I didn't use that option because I thought the B meant working off the battery, not regenerative braking. Actually, I wasn't clear on that until you just mentioned it, Mark.
Yep.
So anyways, but I drove a Prius one night. That's all. So anyways, so with the semi trucks here in New Hampshire, they're, and even like when I go haul cattle or haul logs or hay or whatever, everywhere I travel, I use the term, I climb up one side of the hill and slide down the other. So like when I go up hills and I'm peaking a hill, for example, on like Interstate 91, which goes up through Vermont, but it's like a ski slope. It's up and down, up and down. And when I was hauling hay from Quebec to Massachusetts, I would be topping the hills, like the big hill up by St. Johnsbury. This is like 9 miles of like downhill.
Whoa.
At the top of that hill, I'd be just doing like 30 miles an hour. Not 70, not 65, because I would have to be on the brakes like the whole time. And then what I would do is at the top of that hill at like 30 miles an hour, I would just coast. And I would actually downshift, and my truck had a thing called an exhaust brake, which helped with braking, engine braking. And I still had to use the brakes going down the hill in order not to be, going too fast, because at the bottom of a lot of these hills, you have to make a pretty good turn, it seems like. So, like, you can't be, like, flying. So, anyways, with these...
It always does seem like that, doesn't it?
Yes. So with these semi-trucks... you're actually, with these EV semi-trucks, diesel-electric, that Edison Motors is doing, and they're actually doing this for pickup trucks, and that's what really got me excited about this, because I want a diesel-electric kit for my pickup truck. Problem is, it's like $35,000. But a brand new diesel pickup truck is like $100,000, so, to refort like an old pickup truck is like a pretty good idea. So what Edison Motors is doing is taking these trucks, and they're mostly for logging and like farming and agricultural type stuff, and they're removing the 500 and 600 horsepower diesel engines, and they're putting like a 250 horsepower diesel engine with a generator hooked up to it.
But to be clear, California's not even allowing that.
Oh yeah, they'll allow that. But the thing is nobody's really building a diesel electric truck. These are the only guys doing it, and they were able to produce a diesel electric truck basically within 1 year. Tesla doesn't even have a diesel truck on the market you can buy. This guy Chase said that he ordered a Tesla electric semi truck in 2017, and they still haven't delivered it.
Well, he's a welfare recipient,
Sure.
Elon Musk, so he's probably not that excited to jump to getting to work.
Well, the problem is they're having a hard time testing it and making it work. So these diesel electric trucks are using half of the fuel to go the same distance, and because they're driving the motors with electric motors, and they're using a diesel engine and a generator to drive them, it's super efficient, and it has a whole bunch of options. And we're going to go into a break here, and I'll talk more about and also this guy Chase Barber, Edison Motors. I found out by accident that he's a libertarian. And he didn't even know he was libertarian, but pretty much all entrepreneurs become libertarians when they start learning about all of the garbage government puts in their way.
Do you like being stolen from? Do you like being stopped from making as much money as you can? Maybe you're a libertarian if you don't. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up.
Free Talk Live.
Group of lefties who I talked to about secession, and they were of that attitude of, no, damn it, we must take back Washington, D.C. for the liberals. And, like this constant struggle over power is what they're into. They're not into freedom. They're not into, independence or being able to decide for themselves.
They want to shove whatever their version of tyranny is down the other person's throat. Oh, yeah? You don't like Bush? Well, take a little Obama then.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah? You don't like Obama? How about some Donald Trump? We'll build you a wall. And the fact is that politics, it is a threat.
Yeah.
If you don't think that Trump is a threat against your neighbor, how did you feel about Obama? Did you find him threatening? Because I can tell you gun sales skyrocketed under that guy. Can we please stop threatening our neighbors?
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern at freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Caroline Malone. Police have responded to a shooting at a high school in the US state of Iowa, where there are reports that multiple people have been shot. The police have declined to say how many people are injured or if there are any fatalities. Here's Dallas County Sheriff Adam Infante.
An officer first arrived within 7 minutes of that activation and located multiple gunshot victims. We're still unclear of exactly how many are injured or what the extent of those are, but we're working on that right now.
Well, the shooter has been identified and is believed to have died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is headed to the Middle East for continued diplomatic discussions on the Israel-Gaza war. His trip to a number of countries, including Israel, comes as the Israeli army withdraws thousands of troops from the Palestinian Strip and shifts to lower-intensity military operations, following a ground offensive in the Hamas-run territory. But the conflict also shows signs of escalating into the wider region after a suspected Israeli strike on a Hamas leader in Lebanon, twin Islamic State bombings in Iran, and Iran-funded Houthi militants attacking ships in the Red Sea. Benji Hire reports.
Antony Blinken is again engaging in a whistle-stop tour in an effort to calm tensions. That as President Joe Biden's national security team convenes in the White House to review possible military options against what the US calls the destabilizing actions of Houthi rebels. The Biden administration is also weighing a proposal to name a new top diplomat to focus on long-term Israeli-Palestinian relations, easing some of the day-to-day pressure off of the president during an election year. Benji Hire, Washington.
The first black president of Harvard University has described a right-wing campaign that led to her resignation from the post as part of a broader war to unravel public faith and pillars of American society. Claudine Gay resigned after criticisms centred on allegations of anti-Semitism on campus and plagiarism in her academic work. US correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
Writing in the New York Times, Claudine Gay argued that her invitation to testify to Congress about anti-Semitism on elite college campuses had been, quote, a well-laid trap, and that the campaign against her was about more than just one university and one leader. She said she regretted not speaking forcefully enough against anti-Semitism, but she defended her scholarship. The campaign to oust her has been widely criticised as racist, and she said her inbox had been flooded with death threats and that she'd repeatedly been called the N-word. Kate Fisher, Washington.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. It's talk radio that you control. And 603-283-6160 is the phone number here. You can call in to bring up whatever is on your mind. That's 603-283-6160. And I want to thank Greg Lilly. Thank you so much, Greg Lilly, for being an elite member with us with the AMPS program. We really appreciate that. That means that he is giving money to our AMPS program that you can go to amps.freetalklive.com to get more information on. He's benefiting and has some perks for his help with the AMPS program. And you can sign up at amps.freetalklive.com. Thank you so much to Greg Lilly. We really appreciate everybody who is a part of the AMPS program. And we means me, Bonnie,
Jay,
and Mark.
And in the last segment, we were talking about this story from the Wall Street Journal that I just think is a really good example of the government acting like they're doing something good for people and really harming them. So what it is it says the electric mandates have California truckers charging overtime. Maybe Californians would say, listen, I'll foot the bill as a consumer to not harm the planet, and we could talk about that as well.
Yeah, these EV, mining lithium is way more harming the planet than using the number 2 most renewable resource, crude oil, which is super clean as far as I'm concerned. When you burn it, especially when you burn it in a combustion chamber and you burn it very hot. In fact, diesel fuel, for example, the particulate that comes from diesel fuel is essentially fertilizer. Like, plants use it. and a lot of with the newer technology of like the electronic fuel injection and stuff like that, the diesel.
I'm a little confused though, because I thought that diesel oil was considered non-renewable.
Crude oil is very renewable.
You said crude oil.
Yeah, well, diesel fuel comes from crude oil, and crude oil is something. So it's called the ambiotic oil theory, which shouldn't be really called the theory, but basically it was proven by Russian scientists, almost 100 years ago, that this crude oil is essentially produced by an ambiotic, I think is how you say it, sort of reaction in the Earth's crust. So like the term fossil fuel is horribly wrong. It's misinformation. It is not decomposing dinosaur bones.
So I've heard this, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I've heard this as a conspiracy theory that oil is something like blood and the earth constantly makes more of it and they don't want you to know it. I could believe it. Why wouldn't they lie about something like that? They go to war, they kill millions of people over oil and selling oil. Why wouldn't they lie about something like that?
It was Rockefeller U.S. Standard Oil that essentially created the peak oil theory. So they've been saying since the 50s and the 60s, we're going to run out of oil right now. It was to create scarcity. So like what happened in like Texas and the Texas Panhandle and Oklahoma is the Saudis in the 80s on via the Bush crime family, as in George Bush crime family. The Saudi royal families essentially bought up all the like oil rights to these oil wells. And what they did is they just filled these oil wells with concrete. And then what started happening with a bunch of these oil wells is the oil started percolating out of the ground around where these oil wells were, capped or filled in. And so the oil wells, so the oil, like, it comes up out of the earth, ground, it starts seeping up, and this is where you get tar pits and like things like that. So the idea that oil is a fossil fuel is absolute nonsense and garbage. And it is the number 2 most renewable resource on planet Earth after water. Crude oil.
Well, I think we can agree that the number 1 most cleanest energy source is nuclear power. Everything I've managed to read on fossil fuels says that they are in fact, fossil fuels, but I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I have looked into this same theory before, and I just got to say, like everything I've been able to come to, there doesn't seem, for me, I've been left with the notion that there is a peak to the oil. Now, when is it? That's another question, because it seems to be, hydrocarbons keep getting pumped out of the ground.
Would you be surprised that they would lie about that, though?
Oh no, absolutely. The same people that would tell a lie about nuclear power being dangerous will tell you all kinds of stuff. Nuclear power is
Right.
the safest form of energy that they've got out there.
The people who created the peak oil theory are the same people that lobbied the temperance movement to make alcohol illegal. The purpose, the reason, and that is U.S. Standard Oil. Because basically rural America, previous prohibition, every farm, every rural American household, every homestead was a farm, pretty much. They all had alcohol stills. And what do they use that alcohol for? To run their Model T Ford, to run their Ford tractor, the Model A Ford. All of the original internal combustion engines ran on alcohol.
Yeah.
Alcohol. So there's a book by David Bloom called Alcohol Can Be a Gas. And he goes all into this. So once they got alcohol out of the way, a German fella named Rudolf Diesel was like, hey, I got this engine, Henry Ford, and you can run it on hemp seed. You can run it on canola oil. You can run it on whale fat. And it is the diesel engine. In fact, the original diesel engine ran on coal dust. That's why they call it a coal burner. So then what had to happen is U.S. Standard Oil, the DuPont Corporation, and Dow Corporation. So DuPont was very much into textiles, and acrylic and nylon came out of DuPont, synthetic fabrics. And these synthetic fabrics essentially in the real marketplace could not compete with hemp. And U.S. Standard Oil needed to get hemp oil out of the way, because every farmer in the country could now just start growing hemp, because hemp is like the pig of plants. It'll grow in anything. It doesn't need any fertilizer. And you take this seed and you press the oil out of it, and now you can run your diesel engine in it. And then Dow Corporation had millions of acres of basically forest land in the United States that they own the forestry rights to, mostly the Northwest United States, and they were big-time paper producers. So these three interests, U.S. Standard Oil, DuPont, and Dow, lobbied very hard and created all of the marijuana
laws.
Propaganda and laws
scares.
and lobbied it. They created that, marijuana is going to make black people rape white women.
Yep.
Like, this was the claim of the DEA in the beginning. So
they
had to get rid of it
using
all.
racism to get rid of marijuana and many other things, claiming that one time and you'll be schizophrenic for the rest of your life, stuff like that.
So all these same companies brought you peak oil, they brought you marijuana and alcohol prohibition. And
I only see their economic incentives to lie about such things. But we do have a caller on the line. Dave Ridley here in New Hampshire. What's on your mind, Dave?
I guess our independence legislation is coming up on January 12th. And have you already talked about that today?
I did. I'm making it a point to bring it up on the show every day until the 12th, because we want to get as many people out there as possible to go speak in favor of these two bills. They're both really good bills that Jason Gerhard, Free Stater, and Matt Santonastasso, another Free Stater, put into the New Hampshire State House. And the first one, CACR 20, will make it to where the people of New Hampshire can vote to change the Constitution to make it say, if the feds hit $40 trillion of debt, we're out and we're seceding from the union. And then the other one is Matt Santonastasso's more maybe light bill. It's not so in your face. It's not so daring, but it is a really good one, I think, because how can you argue against it? All it does is create a study committee to find out some answers on things. Like, some Republicans were saying, listen, I would vote on this, but I need more answers, blah, blah, blah. Like, what will happen to Social Security funds, things like that.
So I've gone ahead and scheduled a demonstration for 8:30 a.m. Outside the Legislative Office building there in Concord. And that's followed an hour later by the first hearing. But again, that first hearing is supposed to be followed by another independence hearing. So there's likely to be stuff going on for hours, if not all day. So if you can get out there anytime, probably before 2 p.m. on Friday, January 12th, you could probably be useful, which would be most useful if you can get there right at the beginning and ride the whole thing out by being there at 8:30. If people want to know more, they can go to forum.shiresociety.com, which has all the details, and I always like to sing it, forum.shiresociety.com.
Thank you so much, Dave Ridley. And if you want to find more of Dave Ridley, you can go to ridleyreport.com. Thank you so much for the call. I think it's really important that people show up to that. I think that they're trying to it's kind of a shame to say, oh, they're trying to keep us out of there because they're starting it at the early hours of 9:30 a.m. But to libertarians, that might as well be 4 a.m. to get...
Well, they need to man up for this particular one if they think it's important.
Yeah.
I think that this idea of putting a sort of debt-based trigger is really quite brilliant. I've never really thought of this. Now, I don't think that New Hampshire seceding from the United States is a great idea, but I will say that I love the idea of there being a debt trigger. Now, the U.S. national debt is currently at 34 trillion. And I believe the trigger is at 40 trillion. We may very well hit 40 trillion before, before they even get a chance to vote on this. So it may have to be moved to 50 or something like that. But
and
I
that's
think
just
that
nuts. They're so they're so not good with money that it's ridiculous that they have any power over the states.
Oh, they're good with money. They know exactly what they're doing. This is just a way to move money out of the hands of the middle class into the hands of the wealthy and connected. That's what it all comes down to. The idea that I guess the debt per citizen currently is $101,000 per person. That means all the kids that are born tomorrow are born with a little $100,000 debt.
All the kids with a social security card and birth certificate.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, I mean, I don't know that they'll ever pay off this debt, but they could if they wanted to. And let's not forget that there already is in place an organization that can create U.S. dollars, not Federal Reserve notes. And that organization's called the U.S. Mint. It's making money right now. If the U.S. Mint wanted to mint, a $20 coin, it could. If it wanted to make $100 coin, it could. If it wanted to make $1,000 coin, it could. And there's no reason that the Federal Reserve needs to, that the United States government needs to borrow from the Federal Reserve in order to create currency. There's no reason.
Well, there is a reason. It's called an enslavement mechanism. It's called the invisible tax of inflation, essentially. So it's just an enslavement mechanism that puts all of the wealth literally in the pockets or digital bank accounts today of the 1/110th of the population or the 1/1 millionth of the population. And then there was a book that was a nice little book that explained this quite well, came out years ago, called Billions for the Bankers, Debts for the People. And then there was an updated book. It was Trillions for the Bankers, More Debt for the People. So that the Treasury Department could instruct its mint to mint, $34 trillion coins.
Yep.
A $1 trillion coin. Okay, strike 34 of these coins that we're going to say they're a value of $1 trillion. Here you go, Federal Reserve. You're all paid off. But what happens if that's the reason one of the biggest reasons I feel JFK got assassinated, because he actually woke the mint back up, the Treasury back up, and started issuing silver notes, and
silver certificates.
Silver certificates, yes, and using the actual, and going around the Federal Reserve Bank, and the Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express, and it doesn't have any reserves.
Well, yeah, I think it's a little more federal than Federal Express in so much as the president gets to appoint, maybe it's Congress, I don't know. Well, the government gets to appoint the Federal Reserve chairman of the New York Federal Reserve. So, I mean, it's this veneer of federality, as it were.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
Well, the government has all kinds of ways to enslave us and keep us poor, so that way we have to be in scarcity mentality where, oh, we don't have time to think about higher questions. Why are we here? Or anything like that, because we have to work so hard just to survive every day. And one of those ways is making laws that make things super expensive and stupid for no reason. And I want to actually start reading this article from the from Wall Street Journal about the California truckers, because I think it's a great example of this. It's a very in-your-face, obvious example. If you can't wrap your mind around inflation tax, I think the easiest way to wrap your mind around that is just to say, well, your money is worth less today than it was yesterday because of inflation. But this is more in your face. It says, after January 1st, 2024, any new big rigs, IMC, I'm not sure what that is, registers in California have to be powered by hydrogen or electricity. Already planning the logistics for electric trucks has added 10 to 15 hours a week to Mr. Stanley's workload. And that's a longtime trucker that they interviewed for this article. California has nowhere near enough chargers to service the number of electric semi-trucks that will soon be on the road. Mr. Stanley can't risk a truck running out of battery. Getting towed only 10 miles costs $600. So they made these laws in California that truckers even must use electric vehicles. And Jay has explained that they can be hybrids too. So it's not... at first I thought, how can a fully electric truck even do that? But I didn't really know much about it. But it's just a big mess because you have to sit there and charge an electric car.
Oh yeah. So if you go on if you go Edison Motors YouTube, I listened to a 2-minute clip of him today, and he was talking about how there's 5,000 logging trucks, and he was talking about this, EV mandate in California, I believe, but 5,000 logging trucks. And each logging truck basically uses like an average of 2 megawatt of power per day. So if these trucks were to be plug-in, battery powered, it would basically require something like 15 or 20 times more what the current British Columbia electrical grid can handle. And to update that grid would cost trillions and trillions of dollars just to update the grid, only for the logging trucks.
Wow.
That's not for the truck bringing your groceries to the store, or the truck hauling whatever. There's trucks hauling everything.
They, quote unquote, want to make Bitcoin sound bad by saying, oh, it uses a lot of electricity, but then they do stuff like this. They can't keep their own stories straight. It's ridiculous. And I don't think Bitcoin is that big of a deal using electricity. It's like, well, right now the banking system has the lights on all the time at the bank down the street from where you are, times a million, however banks are in the United States. They have trucks driving to and from them to drop off physical dollar bills and all that stuff. But that's another story.
Well, I think it's also worth pointing out that the United States dollar, the Federal Reserve note, is in part supported by the gigantic military-industrial complex the United States has. And if you want to talk about burning energy, the U.S. military is the largest consumer of hydrocarbons on the planet.
And the largest polluter altogether on the planet.
So, meh.
Yeah, there is 400 ounces of silver in every Tomahawk missile that essentially just gets vaporized.
Yeah.
And what's hilarious is they're using these, $12 million missiles to shoot down these, couple $1,000, Houthi rebel drones in the Red Sea. I mean, it's just, this tactical warfare from a financial perspective is just like consuming that. They had to actually send some of these battle carriers back to Richmond, Virginia to reload on. Or destroyer or whatever, back to Richmond, Virginia to reload its missiles because it shot off all of its missiles at drones that the Houthis were the Houthi rebels, I guess they call them, were launching off the coast of Yemen at freighters in the Red Sea.
Wow. They're not very good at being stewards of your money. The feds aren't. But it looks like we have a caller on the line, and we are a call-in talk radio show, and 603-283-6160 is the number you can call, like Ricky from the Commonwealth. What's on your mind?
Thank you there, Miss Bonnie. Brother Jay.
Yeah.
Brother Mark, good evening.
Hey, Ricky.
Well, today I took a cab into town because I had to get some tobacco. When I went by the salon that I'd never been to before, it was recommended to me because I wanted to get a manicure and get my nails painted, So I go in there, I order my my manicure with my gloss black enamel, and I have to say they did a gorgeous job. They really did.
How do you know?
The funny thing because I can feel it, Mark.
Okay.
Nice.
I could feel it. I can tell the work as it was being done. She did a beautiful job.
I mean, that's a nice thing. Not a lot of men really take care of their nails and go get them painted or anything like that. You do.
Yeah,
you do black.
Baked on. It's baked on, in fact. And I'll tell you what, you do that, it turns your nails into the paint job of a 58 Ford. It's phenomenal. And I'll tell you what, now while I was there, it's all girls, and girls are a very important part of my base. And the thing is, so I did some pre-campaign, and all the girls were crowding around me. And I'll tell you what, the girl was great. She even gave me a back rub on my battle flag as a bonus. Now, the funny thing while I'm telling you all this is while I was doing that, I was doing some pre-campaigning, while my nails were being done. And I was telling my usual stuff, which you've all heard before. But, one of the things I did do is I mentioned about me being a Jeffersonian. I told the story about Jefferson and the Triple E Pirates. Now, there was a woman who did chime in on that. Now, the funny thing was, so I was done at a point, and I was sitting down in a chair. They're clearing out some people. I got to wait because the girl was nice enough to walk me over to the Dunkin' Donuts for my lunch. And the funny thing about the whole thing was, now this woman, as I'm about ready to check out, comes by, and she starts talking to me. And she starts giving me crap about my flag, and saying about and she's wrong. She doesn't know anything about history. She said, that's a battle flag in North Virginia. I said, what about it? And she really doesn't understand that by 1863, that was being already adopted as the flag of the Confederacy. And she's telling me all the other flags. I don't really care. And she says, you know what? I must tell you that, get this one, Mark, that I'm a conservative constitutionalist. Now, I did mention I was a Jeffersonian, so here's where the fun starts. She then says to me, see, the problem is not really the Union. You see, the fact of the matter is there's another word for her than what she said. It's called a statist. Now, I could have said that. She says, not really the Union, it's those liberals. I said, well, ma'am, you got to understand, I'm a Jeffersonian. That would make me a liberal, but I'm not a leftist. What is wrong with these people? Now, I'll tell you what, everybody in the nail salon sounded like a bunch of Confederates, except this one woman. Now, Mark, what is with that?
Ricky, I mean, we've warned you multiple times that wearing that particular flag.
Yeah, it's
I really want to hear your thoughts.
Probably not that good of an idea to wear that flag because people will make assumptions even if you believe it means something else. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government is completely involuntary. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com.
There are basically two types of advertising: direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. Chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. New York City is suing a number of bus companies it accuses of bringing thousands of migrants to the city. Mayor Eric Adams says the suit is intended to recoup some of the money spent on caring for people that were bused from the southern border. FSN's William Denzelo reports from New York.
More than 150,000 migrants are believed to have come to New York since the spring of 2022. Mayor Eric Adams says the city is at capacity and declared a state of emergency several months back. The city's now seeking $708 million in damages from 17 bus and transportation firms it accuses of taking part in the Texas governor's plan of busing tens of thousands of migrants to New York. Adams says the companies violated state law by not paying the cost of caring for those sent to the city. The mayor has estimated that the influx of migrants to New York will cost the city $12 billion over a 3-year period. William Denzelo, New York.
The first black president of Harvard University has described the right-wing campaign which led to her resignation from the post as part of a broader war to unravel public faith in pillars of American society. Claudine Gay resigned after criticism centered on allegations of anti-Semitism and plagiarism in her academic work. FSN's U.S. correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
Writing in the New York Times, Claudine Gay argued that her invitation to testify to Congress about anti-Semitism on elite college campuses had been, quote, a well-laid trap, and that the campaign against her was about more than just one university and one leader. She said she regretted not speaking forcefully enough against anti-Semitism, but she defended her scholarship. The campaign to oust her has been widely criticised as racist, and she said her inbox had been flooded with death threats and that she'd repeatedly been called the N-word.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is headed to the Middle East for continued diplomatic discussions on the Israel-Gaza war. His trip to a number of countries, including Israel, comes as the Israeli army withdraws thousands of troops from Gaza and shifts to lower-intensity military operations. FSN's Benji Heyer has more.
Antony Blinken is again engaging in a whistle-stop tour in an effort to calm tensions. That as President Joe Biden's national security team convenes in the White House to review possible military options against what the US calls the destabilizing actions of Houthi rebels. The Biden administration is also weighing a proposal to name a new top diplomat to focus on long-term Israeli-Palestinian relations, easing some of the day-to-day pressure off of the president during an election year. Benji Heyer, Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at Israel's military strategy. Now the new year is underway, and the world appears to have witnessed the first targeted killing of a Hamas leader in what seems to have been an Israeli drone strike. Salah al-Aruri died on Tuesday in Beirut. He's credited with being one of Hamas's top tacticians and would have been very high on Israel's hit list in the aftermath of last October's Hamas attacks that killed more than 1,400 Israelis. So is this a sign that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is now ordering the more targeted strikes that US officials have been demanding in the wake of a mounting civilian death toll in Gaza? Noga Tarnopolsky is a freelance reporter based in Tel Aviv.
It appears that the really intense period of hand-to-hand, door-to-door urban fighting is winding down, but the Israeli government isn't saying a word. So all I can tell you is what we see, which is thousands of reservists coming back home. You can't hide that. But it's interesting that the United States government has said more about this than the Israeli government.
Prime Minister Netanyahu says his military occupation of Gaza will continue for months after 85% of the territory's population was displaced and 20,000 people killed in the weeks since Israel's reprisals began. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. New York City says it is suing a number of bus companies it accuses of bringing thousands of migrants to the city. Harvard University's now ex-president describes the right-wing campaign which led to her resignation from the post as part of a broader war to unravel public faith in pillars of American society. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken heads to the Middle East for continued diplomatic discussions over the Israel-Gaza war. That is the latest feature story news. Ira Spitzer reporting.
A new report finds climate change skeptics could reach catastrophic levels by 2020. The nation's gratuitously sexual couples announce plans to wait in line at Six Flags. And Grandpa looks absolutely precious in his new baseball cap. Offering a one-stop shop for all your peerless online news summary needs, this is The Onion Week in Review. In response to the escalating violence and rising death toll in Gaza this week, Israel unveiled a new defense system to deflect accusations of human rights violations. Israeli officials praised the new safety structure's ability to intercept an international barrage of war crime allegations and divert criticisms of Palestinian civilian casualties before they can ever hope to make contact with the Jewish state. In other news, a new state law requires doctors to scale an 18-foot wall surrounding abortion clinics. A study finds high school students retain only 1/3 of their obsolete curriculum over the summer, and a man's anxiety is not about to let depression muscle in on its turf.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control. And 603-283-6160 is the phone number you can call. That's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
Jay.
And Mark Edge.
And the caller from the last segment named Ricky, he wanted Mark specifically to give his feelings on why people think he's racist for wearing a Confederate flag that's slightly altered.
Right. I mean, it's because the racists all carry that flag, or at least what we've been taught are the racists that carry that flag. I think that there's lots and lots and lots of racists out there that want nothing to do with the 2nd Virginia battle flag or whatever you want to call the Confederate flag. And I also, as a Southerner, I believe that that's a very attractive flag, but I would by no means put it on a vehicle because...
But it's attractive to you, why? Like, it looks pretty, or it's attractive to you for some other reason?
It looks pretty. I just think it's a good-looking flag.
Oh, yeah. It's just made of all the English flags, which is kind of weird. It's like you want to be all independent from England, independent from the North, but you make it out of the English flags, or the UK flags.
It kind of looks like the UK flag.
No, it's purposely made that way. It's made out of all their older flags mixed together.
Okay. Interesting.
So I just always thought that was a weird thing. It's kind of a pretty flag, you're right. But the other thing about it is I know that it doesn't all just mean, oh, I want black people to be slaves again. I think that it is a flag that a lot of people find like is important to them because, oh, I'm from the South and, the North came here and burned my great-great-great-grandpa's farm down and we deserve to have left if we wanted to. Okay, like, that's all fine and dandy. But there are some things, every once in a while I'll say, that there are some things that you should probably just let go because of the way that you're not going to win. You're not going to walk around with a Confederate flag, but, oh, it has this tiny white border on the outside, Bonnie. So you think people are going to take it any other way?
Flags are symbols. I mean, there's no other way to describe them. They are symbols, and symbology is a blunt force weapon. It is not precise. If you want your beliefs precisely portrayed to people, you're going to have to write yourself a little manifesto or treatise or whatever it is that you want to call this this prose that you're going to put together. But a flag doesn't do that. And you can choose to fly a flag, but if you pick the flag, whatever it might be, if I happen to like the way the Albanian flag looks too. Now, I'm not in any way, shape, or form Albanian, but if I flew that flag, if I had a sticker on the back of my car, whatever, people are going to say, oh, hey, you're Albanian too. Maybe they'll greet me with some Albanian words, which I have no idea. Is that a
language?
Bosnian, Serbian? I don't know.
I don't know.
And some kind of Slavic language nonetheless. And, they'd want to talk to me about Albania. And I'd be like, I don't like Albania. I just like the flag, like that. I'm a kook at that point. And I get, I like Ricky. I think he's he's a lovable little kook, but he's not little by any stretch. He's a big man.
Really? I've never met him.
They've sent pictures and, he's a big man. And yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. If you carry around a Confederate flag, then people are going to think that you support slavery and these sorts of things. We can have all the conversations you want about states' rights and all this stuff, Jeffersonian this and that and the other thing. If you want to use it as a conversation starter and you think that you can turn around those conversations, by all means. But at some point or another, I wouldn't do it unless I was blind. I can tell you that, because at some point or another, somebody would punch me in the face over it. They won't punch Ricky because he's blind.
Oh, I see. I thought you meant unless you were blind and accidentally wore the wrong flag or something like that. I didn't know what you meant by that. But
thanks for the chance to clarify.
But when that's all I can say about it. Basically, I just think it's a bad idea. You should have the right to do it. Somebody shouldn't punch you in the face over a symbol you're wearing. They shouldn't, and that's wrong. They would be in the wrong. But
you can go to town square and scream the N-word at the top of your lungs. Somebody shouldn't punch you in the face.
Well, I personally know a person. He's not like a good person. I don't like him. He lives in Keene, and he just is one of those people who's like, I'm a townie, but I like what you guys are doing, just because he's weird. But anyways, he actually went into the downtown and yelled the N-word at someone down or out of his car, and he's facing charges over it because it's like, it's some kind of law that says, oh, you were saying something that a reasonable person might start violence over. Isn't that kind of crazy? Like, I mean, you shouldn't.
So there's an anti-free speech law here?
It is an anti-free speech law. It's a little crazy.
Look, I don't support the idea, but as I understand it, freedom of speech would cover being insulting, not being threatening, but it would cover being insulting. Now, how do you address that? I mean, could somebody construe as threatening? I suppose they could, but people could construe just about anything as threatening. If you're walking down the street as a 7-foot man with a wife beater T-shirt on, you might be considered threatening. I don't know. That to me sounds like an unconstitutional law.
Yeah. Like just the other day, I was at the mall with my sister and her boyfriend, who's like a giant, and this guy was so weird. He's walking past us and he was like, "How are you doing?" to him. And right before that, he had like done this like shake his head up thing at me, and I pretended not to see it. And then when he got closer, he said to my sister's boyfriend, "How are you doing, man? Hey, how are you doing, man?" Like, because he wouldn't look immediately. He's like, I don't know what he said, but I was just like, why would you start a fight with a giant? And he was like a foot taller than the guy who was trying to start a fight with him.
Yeah, there's some weirdos out
That
there.
could have been construed as threatening, but
sure,
you shouldn't take it to something like that over jail. But afterwards, we're like, what was he doing? Like, that was weird. But if
Bizarre.
anything, seems kind of more threatening than just saying a word that's really offensive. Like, it's offensive and everything, but it's not, I don't know. It's not really like, oh, that's threatening to say that word.
So it looks like one of our producers here threw in 1942, the U.S. Supreme Court established the doctrine by a 9-0 decision in Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire. It held that insulting or fighting words, those that by their very utterance inflict injury or tend to incite an immediate breach of the peace, are among the well-defined and narrowly limited classes of speech, the prevention and punishment of which have never been thought to raise any constitutional problem. So there you go. And that's what happens when you take a radio talk show host's opinion on constitutional law. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds unconstitutional whether some Supreme Court person said it or not. But Mark, you had some more to say about that?
I just think that, I mean, freedom of speech ought to cover being, terribly, terribly insulting.
Like, just in that, what you just read, sorry, it was like, oh, just by its utterance, it causes damage. Words don't cause damage unless it's like you're screaming at the top of your lungs and hurting someone's eardrums.
Well, that's true. I mean, sound does literally strike the eardrums, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I brought in to talk about today was this bill that has passed the New Hampshire House. Now, to be clear, this is not a law. Yep. This is a bill that has passed the New Hampshire House. It has to get through the New Hampshire Senate, which has been described by one of the originators of one of the first free staters as a terrorist organization. The New Hampshire House, the New Hampshire Senate.
Yeah, they're bad.
And then be signed by the New Hampshire governor, which at this time is Sununu, and I think it would have to be signed by Sununu. It's called Defend the Guard, and I think this is fascinating, and I really want to applaud New Hampshire for this. And I'm the first to give New Hampshire trouble. I don't like it when activists call it the freest place in the world and a variety of other things that are said, but I think this is awesome. So there's no news story on this because who's going to write a news story? This is Free Talk Live's territory. So here we are reporting on it. All I've got are some tweets, basically. But this bill, I'll just read this. This bill would prohibit the deployment of all National Guardsmen from New Hampshire unless U.S. Congress fulfills its constitutional duty to declare war prior to troop deployment, which means that your son or daughter who's in the New Hampshire Guard would not be deployed unless Congress did its job and declared war on someone, which they haven't done since 1942.
But wait, Mark, we've been at war my whole life, your whole life, Jay's whole life. How is it that they haven't declared war?
Because they don't have to.
They just declare emergencies.
Right. They just call them emergencies or whatever and send troops.
What would be
fight the whole Vietnam War without a declaration of war.
What would be interesting with this particular bill is, so the New Hampshire Guard, is that a federal thing, or is that a New Hampshire state thing? And New Hampshire state is different than state of New Hampshire, because state of New Hampshire is a franchise of the United States Corporation. There is a corporation that exists called New Hampshire, state of New Hampshire, that is a franchise of the United States Corporation. So this is where I think New Hampshire exit really needs to go, was dissolving the corporation that was chartered under the United States that calls itself State of New Hampshire. I believe it was, I don't know, the Massachusetts charter was like 1889 or something of the Massachusetts Corporation. But so yeah, who do these entities serve? New Hampshire State or the District of Columbia is a real answer.
Well, I would say that the answer is both. In this circumstance, that the New Hampshire Guard is what replaced the militia that was meted out in the Constitution, and that the president can basically call up the guard with the governor of that particular place's approval, and of course the governor doesn't want to say no, and so these things just happen. I love the idea of this bill because, to my knowledge, this would prohibit the New Hampshire Guard from being called up without a declaration of war. And personally, if I was going to fight, I'd like the politicians in Washington, D.C. to take a firm enough stance. So, hey guys, can you get together and just vote on this once before you go and have me catch a few bullets for you?
And I can tell you a little something about the National Guard. I have a handful of friends that did National Guard work, and they learned a lot of skills being in the National Guard. Like my one friend, she was probably still is in the National Guard, but as a truck driver. And so she learned like a lot of mechanical skills. She learned, she can handle driving a semi truck. She understands like towing and recovery, and like
they do a lot of stuff like, oh, you're stuck in a pit. Well, we'll go rescue you in New Hampshire instead of like all going over to another country and bombing brown people.
And they do like a lot of things like there's some land not far from my house that's essentially owned by the Army Corps of Engineers. And like when there's like when it like floods out and it washes the road away, it's basically like New Hampshire National Guard and they're fixing that road. Also, like when there's like real catastrophes and emergencies, that National Guard does a lot of that stuff, and they're sort of like an emergency first responder volunteer force. And a lot of those guardsmen, like, they learn a lot of really good valuable skills. And I can tell you is that I know a lot of people who have, young people who have no interest in joining the National Guard because they're concerned they might have to be forced to go like to Iraq, like a bunch of my buddies did, in the early 2000s in Afghanistan, and basically, be support for like Halliburton and, the thing over, all that, false war stuff.
But more people might join and be productive with it if they aren't at risk of going to die.
Fight false wars.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's really all the news I have on it. I mean, there's not much to say on this bill other than that's what it does.
Did you
I hope that it passes.
How much it passed by?
I think it was a relatively close margin.
Interesting. Well, we do have a caller on the line. We have David in New Mexico. David, what's on your mind?
Lots of stuff, Bonnie. I did want to ask Mark about fun stuff like sailboats and Jay about fun stuff like horses, but you guys have been talking about law, so I think I need to list off some of my, I'll just call them allegations. I'll just make some allegations of law, and you can see if they're helpful or not. And the main one I want to get to is Jay was talking about his kids and that legal stuff back at the beginning of your program. But let me interject. Mark was talking about fighting words. Another thing that fighting words do is if somebody is assaulting you, battering you, attacking you, fighting you, beating you, you want to, even though it comes natural to tell them to blank off and stuff, you want to try to remain silent, because any fighting words that you use, even if they attack you first, reduces the likelihood that the other person will get any criminal charges, and it also reduces your potential for getting monetary damages if the person, for the assault, if you sue them for assault, if you use fighting words against them, even while they're attacking you, it reduces your possibility of getting an award.
And I would think under sort of the new look at things, the politically correct world in which we live, that everything's a fighting word now, right?
But the court, when I've dealt with that, the courts generally are looking at, if two dudes are in each other's proximity and one gives one a dirty look and somebody says something, the other guy just naturally says something back. You want to be the guy that avoids saying anything back so that you can preserve your right to sue for monetary damages should you choose to do so, or if you want to see the guy end up in jail if you didn't participate in any of the fighting words behavior. It improves the odds that the dude will actually get criminal charges.
Just the other day, Lori and I were doing the show, and somebody called in and said here in New Hampshire, some kid got kicked out of his school because off campus he called someone else a bozo. So we were like, what? We looked it up. I just looked up, is bozo offensive? And they do say that bozo is offensive against Eastern Europeans. I've never even heard that. Everything's offensive now.
Yeah. I suppose in Texas, then, if you call someone a payaso, that's offensive too, then, huh?
Exactly, because we thought that bozo meant clown. That's what I always thought it meant. And payaso is clown in Spanish. I only know that because there are lollipops called paleta payaso or something like that.
Yeah.
And
then another thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess what I would ask on this is that can't somebody just say, I mean, so then I can go around beating people up and just claiming that they use fighting words with me. Is that right?
Yeah, but once again, the judge or the jury will have to believe you. If you're telling a lie, you'll have to make your lie believable.
They called me a bozo. I had to get
there. You go. Another, before I get to Jay's children thing, another thing that occurred to me, nobody's ever explained to me. We had at the founding of this country, we had a state militia system, i.e. the Civil War. And somehow the militia system disappeared and was replaced by the guard system, which seems to have been a strategic move by the federal government, by the powers that be, to get rid of the militia system, which hindered their ability to kill people and make money off of it and stuff like that, because the states had more control. I'd like to see somebody research that, because I don't think it was even legal, whatever law they passed to get rid of state militia system and replace it with the National Guard system and the active duty military system. I don't think that was legal as per the highest law in the land, but I haven't researched it, and if somebody has, I'd like to hear about it. But what I wanted to get onto was, Jay, you were talking about, you laid out the various things about your case, and I want to, like I said, I want to make a series of quick allegations. The allegation number one is your case and my case are essentially the same thing, except that it's the state itself coming at you trying to traffic your children, whereas in my case it was a private party, being my ex and her new boyfriend slash husband, that were coming at me to try to use the state to traffic my children, and they succeeded, by the way, as you probably know. I said goodbye to my kids one day when they were in diapers, not knowing I'd never seen them again. And the younger of the two turns 18 on the 8th, which is in 4 days. And I've never had any contact, communication whatsoever with them in that 15-year interim or whatever it was. And so the child trafficking in that case.
I was thinking about this the other night, David. I mean, your story is it's sad, and I think about it, and now, your kids are 18 years old. Can you not contact them? Is there no way for you to do that? I mean, social media.
Legally, to answer your question, yeah, legally I could do it. But here's what happens. When kids have been brainwashed for 15 years, you have no idea what they've been told. They could have been told that I raped them both on a daily basis for a year or two, and so on and so forth and stuff like that. They could be told, and you don't know what they've been told. And even if they haven't been told anything egregious like that, the nature of children, as I have, I experienced it on my own. It's not just with my children. This happened to me with issues between my mom and my dad. And children tend to, out of sight, out of mind. If the dad, like my dad, was not there, it's kind of like you don't know anything about it. It doesn't register because it's never been there. Doesn't. And so if you just call them out of the blue one day, you're as likely to get a hostile reaction as to get a pleasant reaction, and it's kind of unsafe for the rest of your life as far as any possible relationship with your own children, grandchildren, if it's not done in, let's just say a very safe way to do it. If a reunification is not done in a very safe manner, you can end up completely poisoning any chance of anything for the rest of your life. So that's my response to that question.
Well, I'll just tell you this. I'm adopted. I think, maybe listeners know, some listeners know I'm adopted. And it was 1971 that I was adopted at, 4 days old or something like that. And I recently did manage to find my mother through 23andMe, and I have some kind of contact information for my father. My mother came, drove from the Midwest out to New Hampshire to meet with me and, see my house and, just, have dinner, and stayed there and, did all that. And it was wonderful. And I really was excited about it. My dad, on the other hand, has been unwilling, or I should say my father, has been unwilling to meet with me at all. So I guess you're right. Like, it could go any old way, but it could go well, too.
Yeah, I wonder the same thing. If you want to stay on, David, please hold. Free Talk Live is continuing. More is coming up. 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Tired of the ever-inflating US dollar? You can live your life on Dash instead with some handy websites. BitRefill.com has been accepting Dash for years and has a ton of big-name retailers and brands, including grocers, gas stations, phone refills, Amazon, and even prepaid MasterCards. Plus, many of their gift cards are available at a discount. But what about paying your bills? Spritz.finance can do that, and they can send dollars to your bank account in case you still need those for some reason. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. New York City is suing a number of bus companies it accuses of bringing thousands of migrants to the city. Mayor Eric Adams says the suit is intended to recoup some of the money spent on caring for people that were bused from the southern border. FSN's William Denzelo reports from New York.
More than 150,000 migrants are believed to have come to New York since the spring of 2022. Mayor Eric Adams says the city is at capacity and declared a state of emergency several months back. The city's now seeking $708 million in damages from 17 bus and transportation firms it accuses of taking part in the Texas governor's plan of busing tens of thousands of migrants to New York. Adams says the companies violated state law by not paying the cost of caring for those sent to the city. The mayor has estimated that the influx of migrants to New York will cost the city $12 billion over a 3-year period. William Denzelo, New York.
The first black president of Harvard University has described the right-wing campaign which led to her resignation from the post as part of a broader war to unravel public faith in pillars of American society. Claudine Gay resigned after criticism centered on allegations of anti-Semitism and plagiarism in her academic work. FSN's U.S. correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
Writing in the New York Times, Claudine Gay argued that her invitation to testify to Congress about anti-Semitism on elite college campuses had been, quote, a well-laid trap, and that the campaign against her was about more than just one university and one leader. She said she regretted not speaking forcefully enough against anti-Semitism, but she defended her scholarship. The campaign to oust her has been widely criticised as racist, and she said her inbox had been flooded with death threats and that she'd repeatedly been called the N-word.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is headed to the Middle East for continued diplomatic discussions on the Israel-Gaza war. His trip to a number of countries, including Israel, comes as the Israeli army withdraws thousands of troops from Gaza and shifts to lower-intensity military operations. FSN's Benji Heyer has more.
Antony Blinken is again engaging in a whistle-stop tour in an effort to calm tensions. That as President Joe Biden's national security team convenes in the White House to review possible military options against what the US calls the destabilizing actions of Houthi rebels. The Biden administration is also weighing a proposal to name a new top diplomat to focus on long-term Israeli-Palestinian relations, easing some of the day-to-day pressure off of the president during an election year. Benji Heyer, Washington.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number. That's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
Jay.
And Mark Edge.
And Mark, did you have anything you wanted to say about the Bitcoin thing? It's a podcast, so I couldn't pull it up.
The Bitcoin thing.
Oh, I thought you said it was about Bitcoin crimes. I thought it was about Ian. Sorry. Maybe I should have discussed this with you off the air, but I thought that I asked you, was that your show prep? And you said, yeah.
Oh, I see. There is a podcast, right? That is currently, it's one of these true crime podcasts, and they've gone through all the good old crimes, so they need the new ones. And they came after, Free Talk Live, Ian, and all that, and did one. Let's see. I haven't listened to it, but a friend of mine has, and I will read what he said regarding it because.
Did he say the title? Because I'm really interested to listen now.
Yeah, give me just 1 second here. It's The Church of the Invisible Hand. It says here is in the description, listen to this episode from Crime 3 on Spotify. Keene, a small picturesque New Hampshire community, but behind the New England charm, the town was home to a financial scheme that would spill out into the world to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. And, it says, let's see, they say, Ian's the star of the podcast. Considering this production, I think, let's see, that I Mark Edge should be happy that I was not mentioned. I was mentioned one time to say that I was the co-host of Free Talk Live.
Yeah,
let's see.
They call it a podcast. It is a podcast, but it's also a nationally syndicated radio show first and foremost.
And then the commenter here says, I don't think any of the principals, that's you guys, would be thrilled with the coverage, but considering that what they could have done, at least they didn't make him, Ian, out to be a super evil person. I would describe their description as a self-serving activist. So
interesting. Well, so what was the name of the podcast again? They titled it The Invisible Hand.
It's The Church of the Invisible Hand. I mean, do we really want to send a whole bunch of people to listen to this?
Well, I don't know. I thought that it could have some interesting information, but
these are just people reading news reports, I mean, and hoping to get clicks off of it.
Maybe there's some podcasters that could make a response to it that could, like Chris Wade, for example, he explains, the situation really, really well. He's, paid attention to it, talking about how Ian would refuse to sell Bitcoin to scammers. He would find out the scammers, and Ian didn't actually scam anybody. They paid for Bitcoin and he gave them Bitcoin.
They convinced him with all of their might. And, I already said it to the judge. I was witness to this at least one time where there was somebody saying yes, I really do want to buy Bitcoin. Yes, it is my husband. I know him. You shouldn't even be asking me that. I'm offended. And nope, they were lying.
Yes, that sounds like a classic agent provocateur right from the beginning.
Right. And I always think these people are just feds and they don't deserve any restitution. But,
well, here's what I would say if you ever get bad press, is punch up. So to me, I don't know who Crime 3 is. It doesn't draw up in my mind a big organization. And I'm not going to chase down every negative commenter on the internet who has something to say about, that's inaccurate about Ian. So what I would say is that these are little people doing a little podcast, and they can let us know when they enter the premier podcast level, and we'll chit chat with them.
Well, that's interesting. I think it's kind of funny they're trying to rope it in with the same stuff as like, oh, Gypsy Rose convincing her boyfriend to kill his mom. Like, oh, and Ian selling Bitcoin, and the government twisted it to make it look really bad. But Jay, you did have something you wanted to bring up.
Yes. So this February, from 11th to 16th, we have Anarchapulco, the Reborn. Freedom is Rising. So this is going to be taking place at the Secret Garden in Acapulco, Mexico. There will be a whole host of speakers, including myself. I am going to be talking about investing in our posterity and how not to screw up your kids, and giving examples on solutions to, helping to incentivizing your children to, or posterity in general, to earn their dopamine hits and not just get free ones and set themselves up for years of addiction by letting them just, mentally masturbate with internet devices. Anyways, so it's a wonderful event. It'll be my first time attending. Mark has been there before. It's the Secret Garden is like looking good. I watched a video the other day, a couple days ago, about the Secret Garden and what's going on there.
It's the location, and it's like an outdoor speaking engagement park place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful venue. There's going to be like guys like Max Egan. I can't remember. I should make a list of all these people. There's like 80 presenters, that are happening at this. There's all kinds of workshops. If you go to anarchapulco.com, there is all kinds of workshops you can sign up for, and they're adding workshops currently. They have a few workshops listed for like all kinds of things. There's going to be like you can do ayahuasca ceremonies and other kind of like ceremonies. There's like all kinds of stuff you can do. And if you are going to buy tickets, if you are going to buy a workshop, please use coupon code J, that's Jay, and you'll receive a 10% discount. And that's anarchapulco.com. I will be down there. My wife will be down there. And my son and my daughter will also be down there. So you'll be able to, meet all of us. And we're going to also be there for the week after for Agroforco, which is essentially like Anarchapulco's, version of Fork Fest.
Well,
the speaker list is long. I could begin. Jay Noon is on it. I could begin to go through all of it, but just suffice to say that there's some very big names on here. David Icke jumps out, as does Vít Jedlička.
Wait, is David Icke going to be there physically or just like on Zoom or something?
Oh, good catch. It's actually a virtual presentation. Larkin Rose will be there. Jeff Berwick will be there. You can just go to anarchapulco.com. It is a great event. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Plus, if you happen to be in the part of the United States where it snows, it's in February.
Yeah, and then you're in Mexico. Well, David from New Mexico is still on the line, and he did have more he wanted to say about, David, I forgot what it was. Could you tell me?
I'll rattle off a series of legal observations and allegations regarding what I heard in Jay's narrative at the beginning of your program. But first of all, that Anarchapulco, that must be the smaller version of Anarchapulco.
Well, they call it Agroforco, I think.
No. The Anarchapulco, that must be the smaller version of the Anarchapulco.
Oh, because Poco.
Oh, I said it a little wrong.
Yeah,
because Poco means small.
I'm just messing with you for fun. And before I hit the log,
either. I can't even say Chipotle. Right. I always say Chipotle.
Chipotle. Oh, and before on the hit the law stuff, I wanted to ask Mark. It occurred to me what state were you actually born in? Where did you start out?
I was born in Sarasota, Florida. Oh, the state of confusion.
Pardon?
The state of confusion.
Yeah. No. I made an what do you call it? An assumption. When you said your biological mother had come from the Midwest, I just made the assumption that you had started out in the Midwest. What state? What is the Midwest to you?
I don't want to give too much information about those folks, but it was, call it the Eastern Midwest.
Got it. Because
New Mexico's not the Midwest, right, David?
Pardon?
You don't think that New Mexico is the Midwest, do you?
No, but people call Minnesota the Midwest, and then other people in Ohio, they don't think of Minnesota as the Midwest because they think they're in the Midwest. So I was just wondering what
I consider them
defined
both.
as. Yeah.
Well, I generally consider the Midwest to be the. So I would have considered Minnesota to be the Midwest. I would have considered it any states that are directly touching the Mississippi River, and then the ones that are east of the sort of 13 colonies.
Well,
is
like
what
Tennessee isn't, but I think that Missouri is the Midwest. My dad's from St. Louis, and he calls himself like a Midwesterner. But a lot of people are confused by that. But if you go there, it's not really like a Southern state. It's more like a Midwestern state.
I think you can also kind of tell by their accents. They either speak Midland or that kind of Canadian American sound that they make in
like Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, yeah.
Well, especially Missouri. If you're in northern Missouri, it's Missouri. If you're in southern Missouri, it's Missouri.
Missouri, yeah.
Missouri, yeah. So back to the law. So Jay, let me rattle off a couple things that I noticed. Some of these might be helpful to you. And first of all, let me double down on the fact that unfortunately, I mean, nothing can be done about it, but it's bittersweet to me that it's sweet that people are taking interest in your case, and it's bitter that I was not a sympathetic character because I could have used a little bit of the help that maybe you're getting. And then moving forward, allegation number 2 is within a year of being caught up in the family court crap that trafficked my children, it occurred to me that basically every single case in the family and children's courts regarding the trafficking of children, like what's happening to you, what they're trying to do to your children, Jay, they're really essentially they're all the same cases. It's just the basket of ingredients in the form of the players, the money, the evidence, the facts, et cetera, they're all just arranged in a different order. It's the same ingredients, just arranged in a slightly different order. And so I see when I hear you lay out what's happening in your case, I see the parallels to what happened to my case. Like when one difference is the people coming at you is the state itself, whereas the people coming at me were private parties using the power of the state against me. And moving forward, what you specifically noted that you were attacked by the state when your wife went into a store and left the child unattended in a vehicle, and the state comes along and says you've committed a crime, so we're writing you up on this crime. Now, here's what might be helpful, and you may have already considered it, but to me, if you have a together person like your wife and a clean child and healthy child and a nice vehicle, and the crime is we've made a law and you can't leave your child unattended while you go in the store, so that's the crime we're writing you up on. To me, it is a legal leap, an unreasonable leap, as in unreasonable search and seizure. So now we're into your Fourth Amendment rights, and it's unreasonable leap to go from, okay, we allege you committed this crime, but now we got to come and search your house, and we got to come and search your children's mind and search your children's body when there was no evidence present at the crime scene, the alleged crime scene. There was no dirty child. There was no emotional child. There was no damaged child in any way, shape, or form. The vehicle was as it should be. The mother was as she should be. It was just the simple thing of the child was left attended. So to me, it's an unreasonable Fourth Amendment violation to then attempt to search all of these other things that they wanted to search. And then when they don't yield to your assertion of your Fourth Amendment rights, then what it is, now it becomes a civil rights lawsuit. To me, what is it, a USC 18242 civil rights violation, because they don't have, let's put it in cop talk, they don't have reasonable articulable suspicion for anything beyond the child was left unattended, yet they want to come and do a Fourth Amendment violating search. And also, you want to go to the next level, beyond reasonable articulable suspicion. They didn't have that, so they certainly don't have probable cause to then continue with a Fourth Amendment protected search. And when they insist on doing those Fourth Amendment violations anyway, that's where they violate your civil rights in the form of, it's a Fourth Amendment violation, And when you get static, when they start writing you up for contempt and do this and that and the other thing, things that are not supported by the facts, that is retaliation. And retaliation by a government body is de facto. That's not the word I'm looking for. The phrase I'm looking for. I'll give it to you in a minute. But it's an actual.
Literally.
Yeah, literally a civil rights violation. If they retaliate against you in any way for when you assert your rights, you can't search my child, my home, my nothing. I invoke my Fourth Amendment rights. Well, we're doing it anyway, and we're going to hit you with this contempt. That's a retaliation. That's a civil rights on its face. It's on its face a civil rights violation, which then gives you legal standing to go into a federal court and file, I think it's a USC 18242 civil rights violation for court orders stopping them and for monetary damages for your suffering. And that's what I wanted to lay out.
Well, so you're exactly right. And here's one thing. There is no law, there is no statute or rule or ordinance in New Hampshire that states it's illegal to leave your kid in a car. And the thing is when everybody that I talk to about this is like, my dad left me in a car, my mom left me in a car.
Me too.
And so it may be, it is sort of culturally inappropriate to leave your kid in a car. And I can tell you, I was, personally, I was not happy that my, wife left, my daughter in the car, and she was like, in a safe place. And also, when it comes to Fourth Amendment, your car is considered an extension of your home. You can refuse a search of your car. And it has been ruled time and time again that your car can be deemed as an extension of your house for Fourth Amendment purposes. And the big problem with, I wasn't concerned in this particular parking lot, which is not in the middle of a big city. In fact, it is across a massive river, and this TJ Maxx, where this is in concert, is across this big river, Merrimack River, I believe it's called, and the city's on the other side of the river, and basically it is a TJ Maxx, a hardware store, and a Little Caesars Pizza, in this building on an old cornfield is essentially what it is. Now, this was a 100% a retaliation effort, the charge against my wife, because the Henniker chief of police, who I had a nice meeting with today, and we figured out a lot of things, because I am in about 2 weeks I have another meeting with the legislative committee that's going to investigate DCYF. It's called an organization meeting. In fact, I have a few organization meetings scheduled to attend to sort of organize, how we're going to present this and give the committee members this information. So, they're not just bombarded on the day they have the actual investigative committee. These guys are sort of up to date on what's going on, and they can do a little investigation on their own. But yes, it was what had happened is the very same day, April 27th, 2022, that the Henniker Police Department did a motion to intervene in this in family court, is the same exact day that the Concord Police Department filed a warrant for my wife's arrest. And I believe what happened here, and I actually have some public records requests I'm waiting on from the Concord Police. And these guys, I read these communication logs, and we have literally DCYF social worker talking with the Concord Police about the warrant for my wife's arrest, and they got a warrant for my wife's arrest now. And then the social workers are having email communications with the local chief of police, and the social worker says nothing about the local chief of police about this warrant. And this is like all stuff I just went through with him this morning. And the Concord cop's like, oh, well, you need to tell Shallon that she has to, turn herself in, or she will be arrested when we find her. And then the social worker is emailing the chief of police, hey, we need to fulfill this order and this, that, and the other thing. So the whole tone of the communications between the social workers, the Concord Police Department, and Henniker Police Department, according to all of the emails, the documents that I've gotten out of right to know requests, basically a Freedom of Information Act request, and then discovery requests from an actual court case, and then another one that is called a finding. So we got two different sort of court actions happening at the same time, and we got discovery requests from both of them. Well, we've been studying all of these discovery, the discovery package, 250 pages for one of them and 230 pages for the other one. So we've been putting a lot of time into going over this, and then comparing it to a right to know request where we've gotten 70 or 80 pages in one and 50 or 60 pages in another. So we've got all these things from all these different agencies, and we're putting them all together, and we're finding some stuff. So basically, what the Henniker police did on April 27th is a verified expedited motion to correct the record and change court order based on prior material misrepresentation. And so I am, essentially preparing for, the lawsuit against these people. I am preparing to have a committee investigate them. And these actors that work for DCYF, every single case that they have ever been involved in has to be reviewed, because we know of at least 3 and maybe even 4 cases. I haven't looked at the paperwork in the 4th case, but there's definitely 3 cases here where they've done the same exact thing that they did to me. And me and my wife, with respect to doing a contempt order against us when we were not contemptors. We were not listed as contemptors. And these guys have been shut down for this previously and before, and they continue to do the same things. So maybe
Jay,
once they made a mistake.
Can't only a judge give contempt?
Well, yeah, so what they do is the social worker and this attorney, Ross McLeod, they actually they submit a contempt order asking the judge to do the contempt. So asking a judge to allow this contempt order. And what they're doing is they're falsely presenting contempt orders. So I believe that every single contempt order that is issued by family court that is submitted by this attorney, Ross McLeod, and all the other scumbag attorneys that work for DCYF, because they're pretty much all scumbags, best I can tell, are false. And these guys are knowingly and willingly engaging in these false, malicious, essentially prosecutions against people with these contempt orders, because the order to intervene and inspect the premises is not for the parent. There is nothing in there that says the parent is ordered to do anything, and then they file a contempt order, and then the judge is complicit in this. The family court judge, Aaron McIntyre is the name of that judge, Hillsborough District Court, who allows these documents and probably doesn't even read them, just rubber stamps them, is complicit too, because that judge should know darn well whether who is in contempt and if there's a contemptor. So there's actually no contemptor in these cases, and this happens again and again and again. So we're going to be asking that every single. Go ahead.
That's when you say false. Number one, legal term, fraud upon the court.
Yes.
That's a fraud upon the court. Also, they're involved in conspiracy to commit.
Yes.
This, that, and the other thing. Also, when the judge signs off inappropriately, that's called abuse of discretion, legal term.
Yes. So we are. We are actually preparing some more affidavits and notices to that will be hundreds of people will be. Actually, it's another thing people should be doing. It's not updated right now, but go to my website jaynoon.com. That's JAY at JAY. I'm sorry. That's JAYNOONE.com. And if you know somebody who's had their rights violated by DCYF, who's been harassed by DCYF, who's had their time taken, had their children taken from them, email me, jay@jaynoon.com. But if you go to my website, at the top of my website, it says there's a little button you can click on. Affidavit to investigate DCYF is, I believe, what it says. That's going to be updated either tonight or tomorrow to a new notice that is going to be presented to the judge to essentially, the court has to be in common law and demanding a trial by judgment of peers instead of this statutory jury trial. So, go to jaynoon.com and check that out.
Thank you so much for the call, David from New Mexico. And the other people, 3 people tried to call in right at the end when we're in the middle of another call. Next time, try to call in a little earlier because the show's over for today. But you can go to freetalklive.com to hear more from us. Peace.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So